Chapter 779. With just one look, Yang Qindong could imagine what kind of life the 10,000 Tatar soldiers were living. According to Su He, Shibi was second only to Amu Gulong. If even he was so thin, one could imagine what kind of life the other ordinary soldiers were living. These thoughts just flashed through his mind. Yang Qindong looked at Shibi, who was kneeling on the ground, and said, "I heard from Commander Su He that your mother is Han? How can you prove it?" It was no wonder that Yang Qindong would ask such a question. He still valued Han blood. Wasn't there a saying? Those who were not of the same race would have different hearts. If it could be proven that Shibi was really a Han descendant and had the ability, he could be put in an important position. She did not expect Yang Qindong's first question to be this. She seemed to be a bit surprised that she was willing to part, but her expression quickly regained its calm. She then used a perfectly articulated voice to reply, "Duke of Loyalty and Courage, my mother once said that her ancestral home was from Suzhou. My mother's ancestors even had some wealth. However, because they later offended someone, the entire family was sent to the border. In one battle, the city was broken into. My mother also became a spoil of war. Later, she was snatched by my father and gave birth to me." After a series of explanations, Shibi smiled bitterly. "My parents are now gone. I know that there is no way to find out. However, when I was young, my mother liked to hum some Suzhou tunes when she was free. I unintentionally learned some. Now I will sing it for Duke of Loyalty and everyone." Shibi didn't care if anyone was willing to listen. He started to sing, although there were no instruments. Even if he sang without the help of instruments, it still had a special charm. When Yang Qindong heard this, he roughly determined Shibi's identity. He had heard Suzhou songs before. In the past, Lady Shui and Lady Xiang had often played them in front of him. Although Shibi was limited by the condition of his voice, the charm of it had been sung by him. This was very difficult. Think about it. If he didn't really hear about it or was influenced by it, why would a Tatar cavalry learn such a useless thing? Moreover, if one looked closely at Shibi's face, they would notice that he was different from the Mongols. For example, his skin color and expression were similar to many Han people. Not to mention, the great Ming dynasty and the Mongols had been at war for many years. There were many cases where the great Ming dynasty was involved in the war. Yang Qindong didn't have any doubts about his mother's identity as a Han, so he nodded. "Okay, you don't have to think about your background. General Su, he said that you have extraordinary abilities. How can you prove it?" Shibi chuckled. "Commander Su, he is too kind. Actually, I'm just a captive. How could I have any ability? It's just that I have a different view of the current situation compared to others." The first part was just a polite remark. The second part was the most important thing. Naturally, it attracted Yang Qindong's curiosity. "What do you think of the situation?" "Yes," Shibi solemnly replied and said, "During the day, I was fortunate enough to meet Commander Su He. We talked about the mercenary army. In my opinion, the mercenary army's growth is inevitable. In fact, no one can stop it." "Why?" Yang Qindong asked in a concise manner. "There is only one reason. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is sincerely thinking for the common people. That's enough." His face was full of confidence. If one looked closely, there was even a sense of heroism. Shibi's voice became louder and louder. "Looking at the entire grassland and even the world, there are countless people who claim to be working for the common people. However, how many of them can do it? On the grassland, the tribes are constantly fighting. Today you fight me. Tomorrow I fight you. The day after tomorrow they fight you. In the end, it's all about fighting for resources and money. Who has truly thought for the common people? Who has seriously considered that what the common people really want is peace? Look at the great Ming dynasty. It seems that the land is tens of thousands of miles long and there are many people. However, how many of the common people are able to have enough food and clothing? Are they truly satisfied? Especially in recent years, after the great Ming dynasty was divided into North and South, the people in power thought about how to unify the world and leave their names in history. In order to achieve these goals, they can only compete with the common people. They snatch gold, silver, and even rations from the common people. However, they don't know that doing so has already made them lose the hearts of the people. Even if they can unify the world one day, it will only be a temporary glory. They don't know that the common people are the foundation of a country. Only when their lives are truly good and their hearts are at peace will the world be stable. Among them, many have long forgotten that water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. At this time, Shbai was more like an old master talking about the general trend of the world. Many of the things he said were reasonable and well-founded. Even Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei, who were standing on both sides of him, nodded their heads in approval from time to time, not to mention Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the table. This was the first general he had come into contact with who put the hearts of the common people first. In the past, there were also people who talked about the hearts of the people. For example, Yu Qian was such a person. He cared about the lives of the common people very much and cared about their thoughts. Therefore, this person became the castellan of Qiqian City. Facts had also proved that this person had done a very good job and had solved Yang Qindong's worries. And now, another person had appeared. It was conceivable that once Yang Qindong recognized this person's ability, he would be entrusted with an important task. That's right. At some point in time, Shibi had stopped his long-winded speech. His entire aura changed as well. He once again assumed the appearance of a sinner. He knelt there with his head lowered, looking like he was waiting to be dealt with. However, Yang Qindong's voice also sounded. He finally understood why he would rather not give him any benefits and bury Amu Gulong properly. It seemed like he also saw that Shbai was a talent. Yes, Shbai, you indeed have different knowledge from others. Since it's like this, are you willing to join the mercenary army? Yang Qindong said with a straight face. In ancient times, common people were not that important. Although there were many people who would often say it, reality had already proven that there were not many people who could really do it. This made Shbai's gaze even more shocking. Sinner is willing, but Sinner still has a request. Shbai's heart calmed down. He knew that his view should be the same as Yang Qindong's, so he took the opportunity to raise a request. Logically speaking, since he was already a sinner, he should not raise any conditions. However, it was obvious that Yang Qindong was in a good mood. Previously, Suhi had fought a battle, so Yang Qindong was not angry. Instead, he chuckled. Pass down the order. Collect Amu Galong's corpse and bury it properly. Allow 8,000 captives and the common people in the city to watch the ceremony. Considering that they have been malnourished for a long time, let them return to the logistics team of the first city and join the construction team. Let them work while recuperating. After they recover their fighting strength, we will consider joining the army. This matter will be handed over to Division Commander Tiger to handle. Yes. Tiger's Mane hurriedly lowered his head and replied, Thank you, Duke of Loyalty. I have nothing else to ask for. I am willing to join the mercenary army and will never regret it. Without waiting for him to speak, Yang Qindong had already satisfied all his conditions. He immediately kowtowed to the ground again, indicating his determination. Ha ha ha! Yang Qindong laughed loudly. It could be seen that he was really happy this time. Tulu City had been breached, so there was no distance between Yang Qindong and Baiming. Looking at the road to Xian Mansion, the situation seemed to have become even more complicated. Xian Mansion, it was not an exaggeration to say that Baiming was the northern gate of the capital. Once one entered here, one could pass through the wooden fortress and enter Huailai. After passing through the Jiong Pass, one would be in the capital. Naturally, Baiming had also put in a lot of effort here. He had arranged for a large number of troops, and the command center of the Wanquan Metropolitan was in Xian Mansion. The Wanquan Metropolitan was the same administrative level as the new Argonne Metropolitan. Metropolitan Commander Shi Huanshan was a second-rank military official in the imperial court. Not only that, he was also a scholar who was good at war and good at strategizing. This had to do with Shi Huanshan's background. His father was a scholar, and because he was forced to make a living, he was sponsored by a few wealthy gentry in the village to open a school. He only taught the children of the village, but he was truly capable and knew a lot. Whenever he spoke of something, others would quickly understand and accept it. It was precisely in this environment that Shi Huanshan had slowly grown up. Influenced by what he saw and heard, he began to understand many principles. He had originally wanted to follow his father's example and rely on what he had learned to obtain scholarly honors so that he could contribute to the great Ming. In truth, when he was only a teenager, he had inherited his father's mantle and become a scholar. He seemed to have a bright future ahead of him. But at this time, an incident occurred that changed the course of his life. In the second year after he became a scholar, a group of passing bandits suddenly attacked the village and killed many people. At that time, his father and family all died under the blades of the bandits. Because he was still young, he was taken away by the bandits as a laborer. In the end, he went up the mountain and became a coolie in the bandits' lair. There were dozens of young people who were taken up the mountain with him. In such an environment, they were scared to death. However, Shi Huanshan was the only one who was not afraid of power. He stood up and criticized the bandits for all kinds of wrong things, and even proposed all kinds of solutions. If one wanted to reason with the bandits, there was no difference between negotiating with the King of Hell. However, he was amazing because he could still propose some solutions to the problem. The bandits followed his suggestions and soon found that things had become much simpler. As a result, Shi Huanshan probably did not expect that he would be valued by the bandits. The defense of the mountain and how to develop in the future all fell into his hands. Chapter 780. Reality proved that gold would shine no matter where it was. Shi Huanshan suppressed the hatred in his heart and began to wholeheartedly help the bandits expand their power. At the same time, he also learned to blend in and learn some of the strengths of these people. Slowly, he learned martial arts with the bandits. Under his hard work, he gained a good ability. Then, he used his knowledge to lead the bandits, to clear out the nearby bandits, one by one. In the end, he used more than 10 years to develop himself to a very powerful level. He himself also had a very high reputation among the bandits. It was also at this time that Shi Huanshan no longer suppressed himself. The seeds of hatred that had been planted in him for many years finally erupted. He led some of his trusted aides to kill the head of the bandit lair, which was the bad guy who had killed his family and fellow villagers. Then he took the head down the mountain and took the initiative to ask for punishment from the nearby yamen. He also told them about his background and the things he had done in order to take revenge over the years. Just like that, the local yamen, which had been a headache for the local yamen, was wiped out in one fell swoop. At that time, the yamen received a lot of money and other benefits from Shi Huanshan and reported this matter to the emperor at that time, Zhu Qijin. The emperor was very pleased, and Shi Huanshan changed from a bandit to an official. Then he developed step by step in the army. In the end, he relied on the gold and silver he had accumulated as a bandit to pave the way. In addition to his extraordinary ability, he rose step by step. When the Tumu Castle incident came out, Shi Huanshan keenly grasped this opportunity. Not only did he vigorously support the acting emperor, Zhu Qiyu, in his actions, he also used gold and silver to pave the way. Finally, he contacted the chief eunuch, Jining, and expressed his admiration. Finally, step by step, he became the commander of the Department of 10,000 Affairs, a dignified second-grade military official. The history of Shi Huanshan's rise to power was somewhat bizarre and complicated. However, he was proficient in both civil and military affairs. He was also generous with his money. Very quickly he gained a firm foothold. Not only did he have a high position in the military, but he also enjoyed a good reputation among the civil officials. After all, he was a scholar, and his father was also a scholar. In a way, he could be considered a descendant of a scholarly family. For revenge, he had endured for many years, which was in line with Confucianism. Such a person was more likely to be trusted by the civil officials than other military generals. It was also because Shi Huanshan was strong that in the year he was in charge of the All Division, there were rarely any Mongol cavalry around the Xian manor that he was in charge of. The only time Mu Wanggilang led an army to attack him, he was easily defeated by him, which further established his reputation. Shi Huanshan was naturally overjoyed to be able to achieve such brilliant achievements at the age of 35. He always had a smile on his face and was called amiable by his subordinates. However, in the past few days, the smile on his face had obviously lessened by a lot and was replaced by a kind of worry. News of Talu's capture had already spread. This meant that he would no longer have to face the Tatar cavalry, but the mercenary army that gave him a headache. Shi Huanshan had naturally heard about the mercenary army. It was precisely because of the appearance of this army that the northern Ming dynasty's regime was saved from collapse, allowing it to display its vitality once again. Although Shi Huanshan had not taken part in the defense of the capital, he had still understood the situation from the mouths of many people. He had always thought highly of the firearms used by the mercenary army and the extremely strong military quality of the mercenary soldiers, and he was also somewhat fearful of them. The mercenary army had been tormenting the southern Ming Empire, and it was said that they had even conquered 2 small countries. Shi Huanshan had also paid attention to these matters, but because he was too far away, he did not feel much pressure. But now, the mercenary army was right in front of him. It was not something that he could avoid just because he did not want to. In the residence of the prefectural commander of Xuanfu City, Shi Huanshan summoned 2 of his deputies, Commanders Ancient River, a minor rank 2 general, and Prefectural Commander Ning Wenfeng, a major rank 3 general. The 3 of them were seated in a side hall, drinking wine. With Shi Huanshan's methods, it didn't take long for the 2 deputies to submit to him. It could be said that they listened to his every word. Therefore, when the 3 of them met, they didn't care about etiquette. This was also the reason why they met in the side hall instead of the main hall. You already know the situation. Tell me what you think. Shi Huanshan lightly tapped the jade table with his right hand, his gaze passing between Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng. What else can we do? After all, the Duke of Loyalty was conferred by the Emperor. Since they conquered Tulu City, it's the same as helping us conquer Tulu City. Send someone to take over the city's management rights. Commander Ancient River's voice was loud and clear as he spoke very casually. No. After he finished speaking, the commander Ning Wenfeng at the side immediately waved his hand. As his name suggested, Ning Wenfeng did not seem like an ordinary general. Instead, he had the elegance of a scholar. In fact, without knowing his position, very few people would associate him with a general. In fact, his skills on horseback were quite good. He was also someone who was both civil and martial. Back then, in order to subdue him, Shi Huanshan had spent a lot of effort. At the very least, he had put in more effort than when he had subdued Ancient River. It was precisely because he had put in so much effort that this person's abilities were proven. When Ning Wenfeng said no, Shi Huanshan slightly raised his eyebrows. His eyes flashed with an appreciative smile. It was clear that he already knew what the other party meant. Gu He, on the other hand, asked casually, can't? Why not? Don't tell me that the Duke of Loyalty dares to defy the imperial court's decree? No matter how powerful he is, does he dare to openly oppose our Ming? The words openly oppose already proved that Ancient River had seen through the mystery. He was not a stupid person. Thinking about it, if he was a stupid person, how could he become a secondary second-rank military official? How could Shi Huanshan have spent so much effort to subdue him? Ha! Ning Wenfeng giggled in response to Ancient River's question. Knowing the other party's temperament, he knew that the other party was not targeting him and was just stating the facts. He continued, Tulu City's location is very important, just like our Xian Manor. It can be considered one of the gateways for the Mongolian cavalry to enter our northern Ming. With them here, we only need to keep an eye on their movements to stabilize the situation. This is also the main reason why we have not attacked Tulu City for so long. Otherwise, a city defended by only 10,000 people. How hard do you think it is to chew on a bone? When he said this, Ning Wenfeng's face was filled with arrogance. It could be seen that he was also a conceited person. The reason why they did not attack Tulu City before was because they considered the importance of its location. Once they broke through, they would have to face even more attacks and harassment from the Mongol cavalry. No matter how they looked at it, it was not worth it. Rather than taking down a useless city, it would be better to place it right under their noses. It would be safer. Ning Wenfeng's words received a nod from Shi Wanshan and Ancient River. Clearly, the three of them had the same opinion on this matter. Then Ning Wenfeng continued, Now that the mercenaries have taken down Tulu City, we'll just give it to them. With them in front of us, we can sit back and do what we want to do without any worries. Didn't the commander say to the court that we want to form and train a new army? Although we did not get a reply, we did not put in much effort and were only probing. I think we can increase our efforts and think about the practical problems. Ning Wenfeng's words could be said to have pointed out the current situation. What he said was very similar to Shi Wanshan's thoughts. This also caused the commander to laugh heartily. That's right, Wenfeng's words are extremely correct. With someone guarding the gate for us, we can free up our hands and do more things. How about this? I will immediately write a memorial and greet some of the important officials in the court. It should be time for the new army to train. In the Xian Manor, they discussed and came up with a plan. They adopted the strategy of responding to changes by remaining unchanged and watching the situation develop with a smile. They wanted to use the mercenaries to guard the gate of Tulu City for them while vigorously developing and strengthening themselves. But what they did not expect was that the mercenaries, who should be stabilizing Tulu City and digesting the fruits of their labor, would brave the snow and come to the Xian Manor. Of course, there weren't many mercenaries. At most, there were only a few hundred of them. But among these few hundred people, there was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. This was not a small matter. When he heard his subordinate report that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage had personally come to the city gate, Shi Wanshan, who was reading in the study, was shocked. He quickly put on his armor, called for his personal guards, and left the manor to go up the city gate tower. As he rushed up the city gate tower, Shi Wanshan was still puzzled. He could not understand why the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, who had taken down Tulu City, did not properly digest the fruits of victory there and strengthen the city's defenses. Why did he come to the Xian Manor? What did he want to do? Shi Wanshan did not know that the so-called digestion of fruits, in the eyes of others, might be a long process. But in the eyes of Yang Qindong, who was already prepared, it was just a matter of a few words. He only needed to send the civilians who wanted to leave the city, as well as the captured Tatar soldiers, to the first city at the rear. The road from Tulu City to the first city had already been cleared by Lu Zhua of the 2nd Cavalry Regiment and the 3 new regiments, which could ensure the transportation of people and supplies. With this as a prerequisite, the distance of 700 to 800 li was not much of a problem. As for Tulu City, 2 battalions of soldiers were left behind to maintain normal operations. It should be known that it was winter, not a good time for battle. No one would easily have any ideas about Tulu City. Chapter 781. Yang Qindong only used 3 days to arrange all of this. Afterwards, he brought the Black Cavalry, the Wolf Fong Special Forces, and the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad to Shangshuan City. He was preparing to celebrate the new year in Bai Ming's capital this year. Since he had set his goal, he wouldn't change it easily. He only brought around 200 cavalry to Xuanfu City. Yang Qindong raised his head to look at the city that had been strengthened by Shi Huanshan and loudly announced his name. The Duke of Loyalty had actually come in person, causing the soldiers guarding the city to panic. They hurriedly reported the news. Then, all of the soldiers stared at Yang Qindong, who was wearing a red robe. They were both excited and somewhat fearful. Yang Qindong wasn't an ordinary duke. He had another nickname, the God of War. Facts had also proven that this person didn't disgrace this title. Wherever he went, all of the battles he fought were always victorious. This had even spread his name. Now that such a famous person had appeared in front of their eyes, it was reasonable for the soldiers guarding the city to be curious, excited, and even a bit scared. Shi Huanshan hurriedly arrived at the city. Ancient River, Ning Wenfeng, and the others had also just arrived. Immediately, everyone climbed up the city gate tower and saw the great Ming's Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong. Shi Huanshan had seen Yang Qindong from afar before, so he had some impression of him. It had only been less than 2 years. With this glance, he immediately confirmed the person's identity. He immediately whispered to Ancient River, Ning Wenfeng, and the others beside him, "It is indeed the Duke of Loyalty." His identity was verified, and he couldn't see any large army ambushing him. Shi Huanshan chuckled and loudly said, "I didn't know that the Duke of Loyalty had come. I'm sorry for not going out to meet you. I've sinned. How about this? I'll immediately order people to open the city gates. Duke of Loyalty, please wait for a moment." Well said, well said. With a smile, Yang Qindong gave people a very gentle feeling. He immediately recognized the person who had shouted on the city wall. It was Shi Huanshan, the commander of the all-encompassing army. In Yang Xie's security bureau, according to Yang Qindong's instructions, they not only needed detailed information about important targets and people, but also needed portraits and other evidence. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a big joke if they only knew his name and met him one day, but didn't recognize him? Therefore, Yang Qindong had seen the portrait of an important figure like Shi Huanshan many times, so it was not surprising that he could recognize him immediately. The thick and heavy city gates slowly opened without making any other sound. With the cooperation of more than a dozen Ming soldiers, the city gate was soon opened. Shi Huanshan and the others were also approaching on horseback. As he watched the city gates open, Yang Qindong smiled and quickly analyzed the situation in his mind. Then, from this small matter, he came to a conclusion. This Shi Huanshan should be ready to attack at any time, eyeing Tulu City like a tiger eyeing its prey. Otherwise, the opening of the North City Gate would not have been so easy. One had to know that if a city gate was left untouched for a long time, it would rust. Once it was opened, it would emit creaking noises. However, there was no such sound now. It was obvious that this gate had been opened often in the past. It was self-evident what this meant. Shi Huanshan did not expect that such a small matter would lead to so many things. At this moment, he was still riding his horse with a smile on his face. When he was 5 meters away from Yang Qindong, he jumped off his horse. Then he lowered his head and said respectfully, "Commander of the Department of Wanquan, Shi Huanshan, greets the Duke of Loyalty." Duke, Marquis, and Count. These 3 titles had very different statuses. If the other party was only a Marquis, Shi Huanshan would not have to bow like this. However, a Duke was different. Yang Qindong also had the title of War God. He enjoyed a very high status in the army. It was normal for him to bow like this. When Shi Huanshan got off his horse, Ancient River, Ning Wenfeng, and the others behind him also got off their horses to greet him. Yang Qindong did not move from his horse. He just nodded and said, "Commander Shi, thank you for your hard work. Generals, thank you for your hard work." Yang Qindong's attitude made the generals unhappy. They had given him so much face. No matter what, he should have gotten off his horse and said something. Even if it was just a greeting, it should have been enough. Now, with so many generals saluting and you sitting on your horse, What would the soldiers on the city gate tower think if they saw the scene? This was the result that Yang Qindong wanted to achieve. He wanted to use this method to let the Ming soldiers know who was the boss. Moreover, this action should not be underestimated. It would greatly increase Yang Qindong's reputation. Just like now, when the soldiers on the city gate tower looked at Yang Qindong, their gazes became much more reverent. Shi Wanshan was also a bit annoyed. With his intelligence, he naturally knew why Yang Qindong did this. However, he couldn't say anything. It was just this small matter that made him put away his pride and pay more attention to Yang Qindong. In the past, Shi Wanshan was rarely at a disadvantage, even if it was a small matter. But now, the two sides had just met and he had suffered losses. Not only did this not make Shi Wanshan angry, but it also made him more cautious. It had to be said that this was a character. After the two sides greeted each other, Shi Wanshan and the others accompanied Yang Qindong into the city. In Xianfu City, many of the citizens who lived here walked onto the streets. Many of them had heard of Yang Qindong's great name. Now that they came out, it was only because they wanted to pay their respects to him out of curiosity. With so many citizens suddenly walking on the streets, Shi Wanshan was afraid that something would happen. He immediately ordered Ancient River and the others to send out troops to maintain order. However, Yang Qindong waved his hand with a smile. "Sai, this is the enthusiasm of the citizens. How can we disappoint them? It's fine." After saying this, Yang Qindong took the initiative to wave to the onlookers while riding on the horse. He even cupped his fist and saluted when he saw some older elders. His respect for the elders was vividly reflected, and he quickly won the favor of many people. In ancient times, many people valued filial piety. Some dynasties directly governed the world with benevolence and filial piety. Yang Qindong's current actions were in line with the national conditions of that time. It was also a way to quickly win the hearts of the citizens. After spending close to 2 hours, Yang Qindong and the others finally arrived at the commander's residence. Shi Wanshan warmly invited them to welcome the Duke of Loyalty. Along the way, Yang Qindong appeared to be greeting the citizens, but in reality he was observing the situation in Xianfu through these matters. He noticed that the people here were in good spirits and wore thick clothes. Their living conditions should be passable. Shi Wanshan couldn't help but look at him in a higher light. No matter what, Xianfu was considered a border city. In a city like this, the appearance of the commoners should have a lot to do with this commander. Yang Qindong was curious about capable people. He naturally wouldn't reject Shi Wanshan's invitation. He smiled and nodded in agreement. Soon, the mansion became bustling with activity. Shi Wanshan knew how to conduct himself. Not only did he arrange a sumptuous banquet to invite Yang Qindong, he also warmly entertained the 200 cavalrymen he brought with him. Good wine and good meat were served. Then he happily arranged for Song Wenfeng to represent him in receiving the guests. As he walked to the main table, he gave the other party a thoughtful look. Song Wenfeng smiled and nodded. She seemed to understand the commander's intentions and warmly greeted the 200 cavalrymen. At the main table, Yang Qindong sat at the head, followed by Shi Wanshan. Ancient River and the others accompanied them, toasting to each other. The atmosphere was very harmonious. During the banquet, Shi Wanshan constantly spoke words of admiration. For example, Yang Qindong had led the mercenaries to defeat Yes Hen, won the battle to defend the capital, and raised the prestige of Ming. He also heard that he had taken care of a few ignorant foreigners in the south and strengthened the prestige of the great Ming army. Yang Qindong only smiled and modestly declined these words. He didn't show any arrogance because of these things. Shi Wanshan saw all of this and was even more shocked. How could this young man who looked to be in his early 20s have such a calm temperament? How did he train himself to be like this? Thinking back to when he was in his early 20s, he was still suppressing his temperament in the bandit's lair. However, at that time, he was also very hot-tempered. He definitely couldn't be as indifferent as Yang Qindong. At the same time that Yang Qindong became more important, he was even more curious about the other party's sudden appearance in Xian Manor. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 dishes, he pretended to be slightly drunk and asked, "Duke, I wonder if there is something important that you have suddenly come to my Xian Manor this time?" "No." Yang Qindong still had a smile on his face as he replied, "No." "Then, what is the purpose of the High Duke's visit?" He pretended to be puzzled and asked, "Haha, I'm just passing by. After all, I'm going to Ming's capital, and the Xian residence is a place that I can't avoid." Yang Qindong still had a smile on his face as he replied, as if he was talking about an extremely ordinary and simple matter. But it was precisely this sentence that caused He's expression to greatly change. Even Sherwan Shan, who was at the side, had a shocked expression flash across his face. However, his reaction was very quick, and he immediately returned to normal. "Duke, you're going to the capital?" He was truly shocked. Logically speaking, with Yang Qindong's current status, even if he wasn't an enemy of the great Ming, he couldn't be considered a friendly friend either. As the saying went, a gentleman would not stand next to a collapsing wall. If he continued to stay outside, given the strength he had displayed, neither Ming nor the southern Ming would casually fall out with him. But if he personally went to the capital, it would be like a bird flying into a cage. What would happen next would be beyond his control. Chapter 782. It was such a simple logic that anyone could see it. How could the Guild of Loyalty not understand it? Yet he still made such a choice. What was he planning to do? Was he not afraid of death? It wasn't just Ancient River. Everyone else was also shocked. However, some people acted well and didn't show it, while others' faces betrayed everything. Yang Qindong took in everyone's expressions from the corner of his eyes. Then he smiled and said, "I was originally a citizen of the Great Ming. Last time, I returned to my hometown to pay respects to my ancestors. I was also requested by Emperor Zong of the Southern Ming dynasty. Moreover, Emperor Zong allowed me to go to the south. Now that my mission is complete, I naturally have to return to Ming. I have a Yang village outside of Ming's capital. There are still 2 madams there." What he said was incomparably natural and also a kind of truth. However, whether this was the truth or not, no one knew. Speaking of the Yang village, 15 li south of the capital, there were very few people who didn't know about it. It was said that there were many people who wanted to pay their respects to it. However, it was said that the place was heavily guarded and outsiders were not allowed to enter. As for the 2 madams there, in the eyes of outsiders, they were just hostages. Now that Yang Qindong said that he was going home, naturally no one believed him. However, regardless of whether they believed it or not, since Yang Qindong said this in front of everyone, they naturally pretended to understand. The madams discussed this topic and raised their cups to drink again. What they talked about were all strange things. It was purely a topic of conversation at the table. The welcoming banquet lasted for more than 2 hours before it finally ended. Under Sherwan Shan's warm invitation, Yang Qindong and the cavalry stayed in the commander's courtyard. The residents had also cleared out the entire northern courtyard. There were dozens of rooms there, and it was more than enough to accommodate these people. After Yang Qindong and the others entered the northern courtyard, they quieted down. Sherwan Shan saw that there was nothing else to tell him. He smiled and left, saying that he would come again tomorrow morning to pay his respects. Then he returned to the eastern courtyard. Ancient River and Ning Wenfeng were already waiting there. "How is it?" After entering the side hall, Sherwan Shan found a seat at the head of the table and took a sip of strong tea. Then his gaze fell on Ning Wenfeng. Earlier, he had intentionally sent this person to entertain those cavalrymen because he wanted to see if he could get any information from them. Unfortunately, Ning Wenfeng shook his head. "Commander, those cavalrymen only ate. They didn't even take a sip of wine. From the beginning to the end, They didn't even say a few words. Their lips are really tight. We can't get any useful information. However, in the end, Ning Wenfeng still left something unsaid, which attracted the attention of Shi Wanshan and Ancient River. They all knew that something must have been discovered. However, through this banquet, I discovered one thing, and that is that these cavalrymen seem to be treated very well. There are some big fish and meat on the table, and most of it is fatty meat. However, I found that they only eat lean meat. I think this is because they're used to eating such things. When Ning Wenfeng talked about this, he kept shaking his head. It was obvious that he was somewhat surprised in his heart. One must know that because the ancient people's living conditions were not good and they didn't have enough oil. Under normal circumstances, fatty meat was more desirable. Only those who were used to eating fish would choose to eat lean meat. Just this alone was enough to explain a lot of problems. Shi Wanshan couldn't help but nod his head. The scouts have also reported that the meals and treatment of the mercenaries have always been very good. This confirms the authenticity of this matter. Ancient River, who was sitting there, saw that the two of them were talking about food. He couldn't help but say anxiously, "Hey, now is the time. Why do we still care about those things? In my opinion, we should immediately send a large number of troops to surround the northern courtyard and capture the Duke of Loyalty. Then we can hand him over to the imperial court. That would be a great merit." No. When Ancient River finished speaking, Ning Wenfeng hurriedly shook his head to stop him. Originally, Shi Wanshan also wanted to object. However, when he heard Ning Wenfeng speak first, he didn't rush to express his opinion. Instead, he asked with a smile, "Wenfeng, why not?" "Commander, the Duke of Loyalty is not easy to deal with, especially the mercenaries under him. Even the Emperor is very wary of them. Right now, we haven't figured out the intentions of the higher-ups, so we can't just make a decision. What's more, if we touch the Duke of Loyalty, the mercenaries will definitely take action. Once they're angered, they'll launch an all-out attack on us. Not to mention whether our Xian manor will be able to hold on. Will the higher-ups hand us over to stabilize the situation?" Ning Wenfeng's thoughts were so far-sighted that Shi Wanshan nodded his head repeatedly. At the same time, Ancient River's face was filled with shock. Yes. If we make a move now, the imperial court might be happy for a while. But once the mercenaries make a fuss, the higher-ups will probably push us out as scapegoats. We can't do something like that. If only Eunuch Deng was here. The eunuch Deng that Ancient River spoke of was the eunuch guardian of the Xian Manor, Deng Chong. A while ago, the emperor wanted to know the situation here and summoned him back to the capital for questioning. When it came to eunuch Deng, Ning Wenfeng had a different opinion. It's actually a good thing that eunuch Deng isn't here. Otherwise, if he wanted us to capture the Duke of Loyalty, what do you think we should do? Disobeying his orders is the same as disobeying the emperor's decree. Which one of us can bear the consequences? And if something happens in the future, he can send us back at any time. But the rest of us will have to suffer. Ancient River's face paled at this reminder, and he inwardly sighed. As expected, he couldn't think as well as Ning Wenfeng. So he modestly asked, "Then what should we do next?" "Based on what you've said, the Duke of Loyalty is a hot potato that will bring misfortune to whoever takes him over." "Haha, that's about right. Since we now know what sort of status he has, it's better to immediately send him out of Xian City. As for whether he wants to return to Tulu or go to the capital, that's his choice." Ning Wenfeng chuckled, clearly agreeing with Ancient River's analogy. "Send him away now? Isn't that a little too hasty?" This time, it was Shi Wanshan who spoke. It was clear that he was somewhat unwilling to part with such a fat piece of meat being delivered to him. He felt that if he didn't do anything, he would be letting down this opportunity that had been thrown at him. Ning Wenfeng could understand what Shi Wanshan was thinking. After all, this was an opportunity. Alas, this bait was too big, so big that they simply couldn't swallow it. If they forcefully swallowed it, it would be delightful for a moment, but soon their stomachs would burst open. Therefore, when he saw that Sher Shan was still hesitating, he had no choice but to say, "Commander, this matter can't be delayed. Once eunuch Deng finds out about this and sends someone to pass down the order for us to take action, I'm afraid we won't have any other choice." This reminder caused Sher Shan's expression to change. That's right. We should send them away quickly." Seeing that Sher Shan had listened to his suggestion, Ning Wenfeng added, "Yes, we'll send them away tomorrow morning, and then send someone to inform eunuch Deng in the capital that we don't dare to act on our own. Moreover, the Duke of Loyalty is certain to be in a hurry to leave, so we can't stop him. Thus, we'll leave the matter up to them." Logically speaking, with Sher Shan's intelligence, it wasn't that he hadn't thought of these things. It was just that the implications of this matter were too great, and for a moment he was a little fascinated and couldn't extricate himself. Now that he heard this, he immediately made the right choice. "Okay, I'll persuade the Duke of Loyalty to leave tomorrow morning." The East Courtyard was still secretly plotting and thinking of a way to deal with this. In the North Courtyard, Beta Persei also came to Yang Qindong's side and asked for instructions. There was another person standing at the side. He was thin, and who else could it be but Shail? Tiger's Mane didn't return to the capital with Yang Qindong this time, but stayed in the first city area. The sixth young master wasn't here, and the military here also needed a strong person to hold the fort. Tiger's Mane, who had just become a division commander, obviously had such qualifications. Tiger's Mane wasn't here, but he had asked Shail to accompany him. It was obvious that Yang Qindong really thought highly of this person's ability. Shail's speech about the people deeply won Yang Qindong's heart. In order to get to know this person better, and also to give him some pointers, Yang Qindong kept him by his side. This action naturally caused Qibiao to be extremely excited. Shail's mother was Han, and he originally had some Han appearance. Now that he had changed into the Black Knight's clothes, no one could tell that he was originally the Deputy General of Tulu City. And just now, Yang Qindong was talking to him about the current situation. Beta Persei entered the room, first glanced at Shail, nodded as a greeting, and then turned to Yang Qindong and asked, "Young master, the captains asked if we should be fully armed tonight and be ready to fight at any time." "No need." Yang Qindong waved his hand and said decisively, "Then what if this Sher Shan has other ideas? If we aren't prepared at all, I'm afraid that we won't be able to guarantee our safety." Beta Persei added anxiously. Usually when he was by Yang Qindong's side, he was very obedient. Usually when Yang Qindong said one, he wouldn't say two. But now the situation was different. They were in someone else's lair, and it was related to the sixth young master's safety, so he had to say more. He also knew that Beta Persei would ask this because he was worried about his safety. Yang Qindong didn't mean to blame him, but said indifferently, "If they really want to fight, do you really think that we can stop their army with just 200 riders? Okay, tell the soldiers to have a good rest today. We still have to travel tomorrow." Chapter 783. Since Yang Qindong had said so, Beta Persei could only nod and say, "Yes, I will arrange it now." After Beta Persei left the room, Yang Qindong glanced at Shibi and said, "Continue what you were saying." "Yes," Shibi replied respectfully before continuing with the previous topic. "We know a little about Sher Shan. He's a smart man. It is because of his intelligence that we will be safer. Unfortunately, the eunuch Deng Chong is not here, so no one can force him to do anything. So as long as he is not crazy, he will definitely not do anything to us." Shibi was indeed very capable. Her analysis was actually consistent with the East Courtyard's view. Yang Qindong nodded in agreement and said, "You just said that we can leave the city tomorrow morning. How can you be so sure?" Replying to the sixth young master, I will say the same thing. Eunuch Deng Chong is not here, so this is Sher Shan's opportunity. Otherwise, once the news spreads, Deng Chong might react and send someone to give instructions. I am afraid that the development of the matter will not be up to Sher Wanshan to decide. Shibi was very mindful of his identity. Although he boasted of being smart, in front of Yang Qindong, he would only say what was asked and would not show off. This was because Yang Qindong was a smarter person than he was. After hearing this, Yang Qindong valued Shibi's ability even more. This was exactly the same as the result of his analysis. This was also the reason why he dared to appear in the Xian mansion with only 200 cavalry. His life was indeed valuable, but at the same time it was also dangerous. Unless Northern Ming was prepared to shed all pretense of cordiality with the mercenaries, at least on the surface, they wouldn't dare to make a move on him. This gave him a chance to move freely. Well, you must be tired from the journey. Go and have a good rest. I have arranged for people to prepare ginseng soup for you. Remember to drink it when you go back. It is good for your body to recover quickly. Looking at the thin Shibi, Yang Qindong said with concern, "Thank you, sixth young master." She was very excited, and her face was also very touched. The other party's importance and concern in his life made him feel like he was willing to die for someone who knew him well. In his heart, he had already recognized this master and would not change in this life. Just like that, the night passed peacefully and nothing happened. When the sun rose the next morning, Sher Wanshan, with his eyes still bloodshot, appeared outside the northern courtyard. He wanted to see Yang Qindong. Sher Wanshan had already heard from the people in the mansion that the Duke and the 200 cavalry had rested well last night. They had only arranged for 2 soldiers to guard the gate of the northern courtyard and did not do anything else. When he heard this report, Sher Wanshan couldn't help but sigh. This Duke of Loyalty's breadth of mind and his ability to see things clearly was not something ordinary people could compare to. Even he himself, although he had seen through everything, because he still wanted to ask for more, he did not rest well last night. His eyes were still bloodshot. His request was approved. When he saw Yang Qindong, he found him practicing martial arts in the courtyard. He looked very energetic. In the snow, Lin Qindong's martial arts caused the snowflakes to float in the air. It gave people a very majestic feeling. The only regret was that Sher Wanshan could not see the origin and style of this set of martial arts. After practicing a set of military martial arts 3 times in a row, Yang Qindong took a hot towel from Beta Persei. After wiping his face, he looked at Sher Wanshan, who was standing there, and said, "Commander Sher, good morning." "Good morning, Duke." With a smile on his face, Sher Wanshan said with a smile. Yang Qindong immediately noticed the bloodshot eyes of Sher Wanshan, but he did not say anything. On the contrary, he could understand the other party. If he was in his position, he would not be able to sleep well tonight. After the 2 sides greeted each other, Sher Wanshan politely invited the Duke to have breakfast together. Logically speaking, Yang Qindong was just a duke, so the other party did not need to be so polite. But because he had something to say, he became the one asking for a favor. Yang Qindong, who was well aware of this, immediately smiled and agreed. After all, he also needed a way out. Otherwise, if he really angered the other party and really made a move, the other party would not have a good ending. But he was afraid that he would not be any better. One had feelings, the other had intentions. The 2 sat at the dining table. Then, when breakfast was almost finished, Sher Wanshan finally brought up the topic of leaving. "Duke, I have some capable people under me. They have some insights into the changes in the weather. According to them, there will be heavy snow in 2 days, which is very inconvenient for traveling." Instead of directly asking Yang Qindong to leave, he found such an excuse. It could be seen that Sher Wanshan also used his brain. Yang Qindong naturally knew the other party's intentions. This happened to coincide with his analysis of the other party yesterday. But at this moment he still pretended to be very surprised and said, "Is there such a thing? It seems that my plan needs to change. I originally wanted to stay in Shuanqing Prefecture for a few days to enjoy the scenery here, but it seems that I have to leave immediately." Seeing that Yang Qindong had accepted his good intentions, Shan was naturally overjoyed, but on the surface he still pretended to urge him to stay and said, "Why don't you wait until after the snowstorm and then go to the capital?" "Oh, that's not a bad idea." Seeing Shan's hypocritical look, Yang Qindong's interest was piqued and he teased him. As expected, Shan's expression changed as soon as he said this, but he had just opened his mouth to urge him to stay, so how could he slap his own mouth? He could only look bitterly at Yang Qindong. Chuckling, Yang Qindong changed the topic. "This Duke appreciates Commander Wan's good intentions, but I haven't seen my wife for nearly 2 years and miss her very much. I'd better leave first. Oh, right. Since there's a snowstorm, I'm afraid that my cavalry and I will encounter it at any time. For the sake of safety, I'd like to ask Commander Wan to make things convenient and prepare more food for them, such as jerky and wine. The more, the better." Since the other party had asked him to leave, Yang Qindong naturally wanted to take the opportunity to ask for some benefits. Although these things weren't worth much and were only enough for 200 people, it was still enough to disgust the other party. Although the request wasn't high, Shan felt a little sick in his heart. Why was it that when his opponent came, not only could he not do anything to him, he had to take out some things to give him as a gift? At this moment, he really wanted to shout angrily that there was nothing he wanted, and if he didn't leave now, he would be caught. But in the end, this was just a thought, and he forcefully suppressed it. "Well said, well said. I'll immediately have someone make the arrangements." "Sure," Shan agreed. Yang Qindong was all smiles, but he was extremely vigilant. If the other party was seething with anger, not only would he not be afraid, he would even understand. But a person who could suppress his true thoughts was the scariest. To avoid any unexpected problems, Yang Qindong had his own goal. After receiving the food from Shan and the clearance documents, he left Xuanqing with 200 black cavalry and left the Wanquan Metropolitan Division, heading straight for Huailai City. While Yang Qindong's group was on their way to Ming's capital, an urgent memorial was being delivered to Ming's capital. The one who had written this memorial was the commander of the Wanquan Metropolitan Division, Shan. Since Yang Qindong had appeared in his territory, he naturally had to report this matter to his superiors as soon as possible. After passing through Huailai, entering the Great Wall, exiting Juyong Pass, Ming's capital was finally within sight. It had been nearly 2 years since they had parted, and when he thought about his 2 wives, Yang Qindong felt all sorts of emotions well up in his heart. In terms of time, it hadn't even been 2 years since he had left the capital to pay respects to his ancestors, but he had truly accomplished many things. He had defeated the Huang bandits, wiped out the Jiaoji and Lancang kingdoms, and now built a large city on the steppe. This seemed like an impossible task that would have taken many years, but he had accomplished it in a short period of time. Just this achievement alone was enough to leave his name in the annals of history. Even if he were to return home and become a wealthy man or a duke, he would still be able to live a carefree life. But when he thought about how there were still so many Han commoners wandering outside and being bullied by others, and how his descendants would be harassed by foreign tribes, their families destroyed, and they would be reduced to slaves and humiliated, Yang Qindong's heart madly thumped. Since he had come here by chance, he had to do some things. Otherwise, wouldn't he be letting down the heavens? At the very least, I've laid down the foundation. As long as I continue to develop normally, everything will be fine. Everything will change. Encouraging himself, Yang Qindong rode on his white dragon horse and raised its whip, increasing its speed toward Ming's capital. Ming's capital. It was still as bustling as ever. Crowds flowed through the streets, and the sounds of hawking could be heard. It was as lively and prosperous as the along the river during the Qingming festival. In contrast, the imperial palace of the capital was in chaos. Several junior eunuchs from the Bureau of Rites had hurriedly led their teams out of the palace to inform the important officials to discuss matters with the emperor. The main reason for this was the urgent report that Shan had delivered. Emperor Zhu Qiyu had never imagined that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, who had given him such a headache and left him helpless, would suddenly appear in the Xuanfu residence. Looking at the report from the commander of the Myriad Affairs Bureau, Shirwan Shan, he realized that this person's goal was the capital of Baiming. When Jining, the head eunuch, hurriedly delivered the memorial to the throne to him, Zhu Qijin was really startled. He almost jumped up from the dragon throne and cried out in alarm. Chapter 784. Regarding what Yang Qindong had done with the mercenaries in the north, there were naturally regular reports from the spies of the military's brocade guard, which had also provoked Zhu Qiyu's anger and delight. He was angry because of the actions of the mercenaries in the new Urgon capital region. After 3 battles, Baiming's northern guard had lost nearly 20,000 soldiers. He was happy because Yang Qindong's appearance had greatly reduced the military pressure on Baiming in the north. According to the Datong Prefecture's report, even Wali Yeshin's troops that had already occupied the Hetao region had stopped their attacks because of the establishment of the first city and the appearance of the mercenaries. From this, one could see the prestige of Yang Qindong. It was a pity that this person could not only be used by him. If he could, it would not be difficult to defeat the southern Ming Empire and unify the world. Zhu Qiyu touched his forehead as if he had a headache. This small action was seen by Jining, who was standing at the side and serving him. He hurriedly asked with concern, "Your Majesty, are you feeling unwell?" "No. Inform them. The officials should be here soon, right?" Zhu Qiyu shook his head. He thought about why the officials had not arrived yet and asked a few more questions. "I've already informed them. They should be here soon," Jining hurriedly replied. Then he raised his foot and looked outside the hall. Although he could not see anything by doing this, he wanted to use this action to tell the emperor that he was also very anxious. They did not have to wait for long. Soon, a flurry of footsteps sounded outside the hall. Then, the voice of a eunuch was heard. "Your Majesty, Minister of War Ming has arrived. He requests an audience." "Your Majesty, Minister of Justice Su Yozhin has arrived. He requests an audience." "All right. Call them all in." Jining had been looking at Zhu Qiyu from the corner of his eyes. Although he did not say anything, his face was already filled with impatience. Thus he acted on his own initiative and shouted loudly outside. In a short while, the Minister of Personnel Wang Ji, the Minister of Revenue Jin Lian, the Minister of Rights Hu Chang, the Minister of War Ming, the Minister of Justice Su Yozhin, the Minister of Works Shi Pu, and the Imperial Censor of the Left Chen entered the Imperial Palace and stood in line. In less than 2 years, there were not many changes in Zhu Qiyu's regime. In reality, Baiming didn't seem to have any major issues, and its internal affairs were stable and united. But in reality, it was nothing more than a golden exterior. Zhu Qiyu's ascension to the throne was, after all, a special case. It wasn't a normal ascension to the throne, which caused many people to criticize him. In fact, it had already been 3 years since the defeat of Tumu, but there were still people mentioning that matter. The general idea was that since Ingzong was fine, he should have come back to be the emperor instead of going to the southern Ming Empire to be the southern emperor. As a result, the powerful Great Ming Empire was split into 2 halves, and its strength was greatly reduced. There were still people who were doubtful about the position below his, but for this reason, the Genie Guards and the Eastern Palace Guards contributed a lot and arrested a lot of people. On the surface, it seemed to be calm. But once a crisis was discovered, no one could be sure that no one would come out to make trouble. The military had been training new recruits and refining firearms, which were very expensive things. For a time, it caused the Baiming regime to be unable to make ends meet, so that many official salaries couldn't be paid in time, which caused many people to complain. External affairs. Needless to say, the southern Ming Empire seemed to be harmonious. But who knew what kind of thoughts Zhu Qijin had for his brother, who stole the throne? They didn't use it now because of the rampant foreign invasion. But once there was no foreign invasion, there would be a big war to determine the winner. Not to mention, because of the problems in the joint business, the kingdom of Wara was no longer as friendly as before. The other side had even sent troops to occupy the Hetao region, which made the western region restless. At this time, mercenaries came from the northwest, which made the situation more complicated. With all kinds of situations added together, Zhu Qiyu often felt a headache coming on. In such an environment, the ministers naturally didn't move if they could. Otherwise, it would only cause panic and other complicated situations to arise. 6 ministers and a censor of the left were standing in the main hall. They were all puzzled. They couldn't figure out why the emperor was in such a hurry to summon them. It seemed that they had just started the court meeting this morning. At that time, the emperor didn't say anything and just waited for them to return home. Their buttocks hadn't even warmed up from their seats yet, and now they were urgently summoned. Could it be that something urgent had happened? Thinking of this, the expressions of the 7 ministers changed. The first thing they thought of was that the Walla had attacked. Perhaps this was the only thing that could make the emperor so uneasy. Thinking about it, did Ningzong lose to Yeshan? As for why no one thought about the southern Ming Empire and the mercenaries, it was because, in a sense, they were on the same side. Now that the external threat had not been dealt with, there shouldn't be any internal problems. The expressions of the 7 ministers changed one after another, but they were all calm. No one said anything, waiting for the emperor's orders. Zhu Qiyu had long been used to the scene. He also knew that these ministers were all scheming people. Normal things wouldn't be able to provoke them. Good, since it was like this, he would make a move today to provoke them. Jining, let the ministers have a look at the memorial. Yes, Your Majesty. Jining agreed, holding the memorial that Shi Wanshan had sent. She was the first to walk in front of the Minister of Personnel, Wang. Minister Wang, please have a look. Since ancient times, the officials of the Ministry of Personnel were one level higher than the officials. They were also known as the heavenly official of the Ministry of Personnel. Thus, it was never wrong to let Wang Ji have a look first. Wang Ji nodded his head reservedly. Then he took the memorial and began to read it. But in just a few breaths, his expression kept changing. It was obvious that this memorial must be about something important. Otherwise, the heavenly official of the Ministry of Revenue, who usually didn't show his joy on his face, wouldn't be so nervous and lose his composure. After about 10 breaths, Wang Ji returned the memorial to great eunuch Jining. Then the memorial was passed down to the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian. His expression also changed, no different from Wang Ji's earlier expression. After another 10 breaths, the memorial continued to be passed down, and the same thing happened again and again. Zhu Qiyu sat high on the golden dragon throne, carefully observing the changing expressions on the ministers' faces. Every time he saw a minister about to lose his composure, he felt extremely proud. How is it? I must have scared all of you this time. Otherwise, when I lose my composure, you would always lecture me to calm down. Now, look at all of you. How are you going to calm down? In a little more than 10 minutes, the 7 ministers had all read the memorial. Jining returned to Zhu Qiyu's side and stood at the side. The Emperor of Dai, Zong's voice resounded through the hall. Everyone has seen the news, yes? Tell me what you think. The hall was silent. No one immediately responded to the Emperor's question, as if they were still digesting the news they had just received. When Zhu Qiyu impatiently asked again, the Minister of Justice, Suyojin, finally stood up and said, Your Majesty, may this subject be so bold as to ask, is this news true? Could it be someone pretending to be the Duke of Loyalty and Courage? It was no wonder that Suyojin would ask such a question. Yang Qindong was no longer the same as before. In the battle to defend the capital after Tomu's defeat, Yang Qindong had stepped forward and led the so-called mercenaries to defeat the menacing Yeshan's Wara army. At the time, he had a reason to say that this army didn't belong to him because he had saved someone, and that person just so happened to be the leader of the mercenaries. Now it seemed that this was just a story. All kinds of evidence had already shown that the so-called leader of the mercenaries was none other than Yang Qindong himself. This had long been reported from the southern Ming Empire, and according to the investigations of the Bai Ming Brocade Guard and the East Faction Guards, the mercenaries were very powerful and should have an overseas base. It was only because most of the great Ming Empire ships were in the southern Ming Empire that they couldn't investigate. But in any case, it was more or less confirmed that Yang Qindong was the leader of the mercenaries. Then why did Yang Qindong appear in Bai Ming's capital at this time? Didn't he know that this method was no different from entering the tiger's den? This was tantamount to delivering oneself to be slaughtered. Su Yozhin was the first to be chosen by Yang Qindong and spent a lot of effort to support him to become a minister. He really couldn't understand the meaning behind Yang Qindong's actions, which was why he asked this question. Most importantly, he didn't receive any information in advance this time. He was a spy. Su Yozhin couldn't figure it out and couldn't understand it. He wasn't the only one. The other ministers also had the same thought. At least in their view, if they were in the same situation, they would never appear in Bai Ming's capital. If they had to appear, they would have to bring an army. Only when the soldiers were at the city gates would they have the power to deter others. Finally, someone spoke. Zhu Qiu nodded in satisfaction and said to Su Yozhin, "Minister Su, Commander sure has seen the Duke of Loyalty before. Since he has submitted a memorial, he wouldn't joke about such a matter. It seems that it is the Duke of Loyalty." Since the Emperor had said so, even if Su Yozhin had doubts, he couldn't say anything about this matter. He could only nod and return to his seat. If the person who came was really the Duke of Loyalty, then he needed to think about what to do next. There was no need for him to immediately express his opinion. Su Yozhin retreated. Minister of War Ming stepped out from his seat and said, "Your Majesty, if the person who came is really the Duke of Loyalty, this subject requests that you interrogate him properly. At the same time, have him hand over the command of the mercenaries to my Bai Ming. If this happens, my Bai Ming's military strength will greatly increase. At that time, whatever Walla or Yes Hen, they will no longer be our opponents. Not only that, we also have a high chance of recovering the southern Ming Empire and unifying the world." Chapter 785. Ming's voice became louder and louder, and he became more and more excited. When he reached the end of his sentence, his face was flushed red. Evidently, he was excited because of this result. Zhu Qiu was also excited, and his face was also flushed red. This was the reason why he called the ministers over. He already had such an idea. Since he knew that Yang Qindong was the leader of the mercenaries, how could he not grab hold of him when he was sent to him? Good, good. In his excitement, Zhu Qiu couldn't help but nod. However, the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, spoke up. "Your Majesty, you can't do that." Zhu Qiu, who was in a good mood, immediately became unhappy when he heard this. When he saw that the person who spoke was Wang Ji, he couldn't help but snort coldly. The dissatisfaction on his face was completely displayed. Wang Ji's grandson, Wang Si, had once been on good terms with Yang Qindong, and had even been part of the first batch of students at the Yang Family Academy. Not only that, but after Yang Qindong left Bai Ming, everything related to the Yang Family Academy had been taken care of by him. It could be said that he was a true student of Yang Xie and also a staunch supporter of Yang Qindong. Because of this matter, Wang Ji had been accused by many people in the past 2 years. Some said that he was colluding with a foreign country. Some said that he was betraying his master for glory, and some even said that he was Yang Qindong's dog, waiting to bite at any time. In the face of these accusations, Wang Ji had never defended himself. He just did his job obediently. He admired Yang Qindong, but he had never worked together with him. Recently, he hadn't contacted him at all. As the saying goes, if you don't do anything wrong, you don't have to be afraid of ghosts calling at your door. With this kind of mentality, Wang Ji still did things his own way. Daizong Zhu Qiu was also dissatisfied with him, But because Wang Ji's ability was outstanding under his coordination, the promotion of officials were carried out in an orderly manner, so he rarely had to worry about it. At this time, if it was another person, there might not be such good results. Not to mention, after being the Minister of Personnel for so many years, he had disciples all over the world. If he wanted to target Wang Ji, it would be impossible without a clear plan. It would only lead to chaos, and that was not what Zhu Qiyu wanted to see. However, not moving Wang Ji did not mean that Zhu Qiyu liked him. Seeing this person jump out so quickly at this time, of course he was unhappy in his heart. He only snorted coldly and did not reprimand him. This was already giving him a lot of face. Zhu Qiyu's face was filled with displeasure. Wang Ji was not moved by this. Everything he did was for the good of Bai Ming. He did not care about anything else. Even if he spoke now, it was for the good of Bai Ming. Your Majesty, you must not act rashly. The Duke of Loyalty has not committed any great crime. If we act rashly, what excuse can we use to control him? Moreover, if we act against the Duke of Loyalty, what will the mercenaries do? Will they attack us, Bai Ming? Although we have more than half of the new recruits, their fighting strength is not fully formed. If we fight with the mercenaries now, it is difficult to determine the outcome. If we do this, we will only let others benefit from it, Your Majesty. There was no need for Wang Ji to explain the strength of the mercenaries. Who in the room did not know? If their fighting strength was too weak, how could they defeat Walla and force Yes Hen to retreat? How could they defeat the Huang bandit army that gave the southern Ming Empire a headache so easily? How could they destroy Jiaoji and Lancang kingdoms so easily? Now, they had come to the northwest of Bai Ming. It was said that they had built a large city there and defeated Agadalji and Mabe Mongols, killing and capturing 70,000 cavalry. At the very least, this was not a result that Bai Ming's new recruits could achieve. Against this kind of enemy, everything had to be done carefully. Otherwise, the slightest carelessness would bring about a disaster. With such thoughts and concerns, Wang Ji immediately stood up. As soon as he said this, the other officials hesitated. The other ministers who wanted to speak also completely shut their mouths at this time. With their abilities, they naturally understood that Wang Ji's words were correct. If they killed the Duke of Loyalty, they would anger the mercenaries. The consequences of that would be unbearable for Bai Ming. At that time, Bai Ming would be destroyed and the southern Ming Empire would unify the world. For these officials who were used to considering the gains and losses before doing anything, when they knew that using methods against Yang Qindong would bring about unknown consequences, they could not help but remain silent and suppress the excitement in their hearts. After Wang Ji made his stance clear, the other officials did not speak. It was as if they were shocked by the situation in front of them and needed time to think before making a final decision. Zhu Qiyu looked at the situation in front of him and knew that it was impossible for him to get a result. He could only say, "In that case, we will give you 3 days. After 3 days, everyone can write their thoughts into memorials for us to preview. For now, you can all leave." There was no coercion. It seemed that Zhu Qiyu also needed time to think about this before making a final decision. Fortunately, the memorials were sent at the speed of 800 li. It was unknown how much faster it was than Yang Qindong's 200 cavalry. They still had time to prepare. The 7 officials knelt on the ground and said, "Long live the emperor," before getting up and leaving. However, it could be seen that each of their faces was incomparably heavy, as if they had something on their minds. Wang Ji's residence. Not long after the minister returned, his grandson Wang Si walked into the main hall. "Grandfather, you have something urgent to talk to me about?" On the way back, Wang Ji had arranged for people to go to Yang village to inform his most valued grandson. Seeing that his grandson had rushed back so quickly, Wang Ji's face could not help but reveal a trace of gratification. Wang Ji had been the Minister of Personnel for many years. He could be considered an old official and had worked with the 3 Yangs before. It could be said that he had seen the ups and downs of aristocratic families. In the end, he learned something. If an aristocratic family wanted to continue to exist, it was useless to rely on a temporary imperial favor. Did you not see the glory of the three Yangs? But now, how many of their descendants would mention it? Of course, Yang Rong's youngest son, Yang Qindong, was an exception. Even until now, Wang Ji still couldn't figure out how this person made his fortune. How did he manage to create such a powerful mercenary army? A temporary imperial favor was not enough. If he wanted the family to continue to prosper, he needed more talents. As long as he had the ability, with the help of the family, there would be a day when he would rise to the top. That was the way to continue to prosper. As such, Wang Ji had always placed great importance on the nurturing of the family's descendants. Wang Si was the most outstanding person in the third generation. Based on Wang Ji's plan, this grandson would first train in some of the smaller departments. Once he had enough experience, it was inevitable that he would be entrusted with important tasks. But he never thought that the most valued grandson would be interested in Yang Qindong's Yang Shui and couldn't get out of it. He even threw his previous official position aside, using the excuse that he was not feeling well. He only focused on learning Yang Shui in Yang Village and became a teacher. It was originally a good thing for his descendants to study and study. Once one's knowledge reached a certain level, one would be able to understand the world. Thus, one would not have to worry about not having a good future. However, Wang Si was learning Yang Shui, so everything was different. Even now, there were still many scholars in the capital who criticized Yang Shui. They felt that this was not the path of a saint, but an unorthodox path. It was a perverted technique that could not be used in the public. Regarding this, Wang Ji had always been hesitant. There was even a period of time when he wanted to intervene and have his beloved grandson leave the Yang family academy and return as an official. However, it was at this moment that news of Yang Qindong leading the mercenaries to victory spread. Even the faraway Jiaoji and Lancang kingdoms were annihilated, just like that. Upon entering the capital with such results, Wang Ji immediately cut off his previous thoughts. He decided to take a look. Perhaps his beloved grandson Wang Si had made the right choice? It was because of Wang Ji's hesitation that Wang Si was able to become the temporary principal of the Yang family manor for the past 2 years. He was not affected by the outside world. However, he did not know that the real principal was about to return. It was destined that the Yang family manor and Yang family academy, which were gradually being forgotten by others, would be valued once more. To his closest relative, to his favorite grandson, Wang Ji did not beat around the bush. Sire, sit down first. Listen to your grandfather tell you something. Seeing his grandfather's grave expression, Wang Si nodded and found the nearest chair to sit down. He looked at Wang Si in confusion, and then he quickly jumped up from the chair. Grandfather, what did you say? The Duke of Loyalty has already passed the Xian residence and is heading to the capital? It was no wonder that Wang Si was so excited. Although he was a teacher in the Yang family academy, he had a deep understanding of everything related to Yang Qindong. This was naturally due to the fact that his grandfather frequently sent people to inform him of the news. But more importantly, his actions had already gained the approval and trust of the 2 madams of the Yang family manor. So when there was any news, he would naturally know about it very quickly. And every time he received a piece of news, Wang Si would be excited for several days. This was especially so when he learned that Yang Qindong had led the mercenaries to destroy the 2 small kingdoms of Jiaoji and Lancang. He had even thought of leaving the capital and looking for Yang Qindong. After all, Wang Si was still a young man, only in his 20s. Impulsiveness and restlessness were still in their nature. The thought of leading an army to kill enemies on the battlefield made him excited. He only hoped that one day Yang Qindong would remember him and summon him to his side. He had been preparing for this all this time. Chapter 786. But to his surprise, this idea was about to come true. Yang Qindong was actually heading straight for the capital. He wanted to see his teacher. Perhaps in the future he would be able to follow by his side and gallop on the battlefield. Grandfather, how many soldiers did the Duke of Loyalty bring with him this time? Excited, Wang Si looked at Wang Ji expectantly. According to the report, there were only 200 cavalrymen following him. Wang Ji replied without hiding anything. Only 200 cavalrymen? Wang Si couldn't help but frown and ask, "Did the emperor summon him back?" No, the emperor didn't have such thoughts, nor did he issue such a decree. It was all done by the Duke of Loyalty himself. Wang Ji replied with a satisfied look in his eyes. Just from these two questions, it could be seen that his grandson was indeed a meticulous person and considered things very comprehensively. Wang Si didn't look at his grandfather's attitude towards him and instead lowered his head. After a while, he suddenly raised his head and said, "In that case, the Duke of Loyalty is in danger." His grandson finally thought of this. Wang Ji chuckled, "That's right." "That's not right." Unexpectedly, Wang Si quickly shook his head. "There shouldn't be any great danger. If we can see it, the Duke of Loyalty will definitely be able to see it as well." But he still only brought 200 cavalrymen to the capital. This means that he should have something to rely on. It's just that I haven't thought of it yet. As expected of Wang Ji's beloved grandson and someone that Yang Qindong had taken a liking to be able to think of this matter so quickly, just in terms of intelligence, he wasn't much different from some of the important officials. As long as he got rid of the impatience in his heart, given enough time, he would definitely become a great person. Wang Ji was very satisfied, but at the same time he was thinking of another problem. Since his grandson was so promising, as his grandfather, he had to ensure his safety. Return to the Yang family manor in a while and stay there. Before the Duke of Loyalty returns, you must not leave the manor. Do you understand? Grandson understands. Many thanks for grandfather's concern. Although there were still many things that Wang Si didn't understand, he still prepared to ask questions. But he also knew that his grandfather was saying all this for his own safety. Perhaps with Yang Qindong's current strength and influence, the emperor would not dare to do anything to him. But he could still deal with some of the people around the Yang clan. Unfortunately, he was one of them. After that, Wang Si asked a lot of questions. Regarding this, Wang Ji answered every question and explained everything clearly. From time to time, one could see Wang Si nodding or looking relieved. He finally knew what Yang Qindong was relying on. The powerful mercenaries were his backing. Even the Daizong Emperor didn't dare to act rashly. Perhaps this was what he was relying on. At the same time, in the Hu mansion, Hu Shao summoned his eldest son, Hu Changning, to his study. Father and son met in a secret room. He told his father the reason for the emperor's urgent summons. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is back. It's a bit dangerous to only bring 200 cavalrymen. Hu Changning was also a smart person. While he was surprised, he also pointed out the key point of the matter. It is a bit dangerous, but it's not important. Hu Shao, who had known the news long ago, had thought of many things on his way back from the palace. Now that he said it was not important, it was clear that he had thought through some key issues. It was still the same question. Why did Yang Qindong only bring 200 cavalrymen back to the capital of Ming? Could it be that he was stupid or crazy? Or was he so arrogant that he thought that no one would dare to touch him? To be able to control such a powerful force at the age of 23, destroy 2 small countries in succession, and even build a large city on the plains where the situation was complicated and chaotic, it was clear that he wanted to compete with the Mongolian cavalry. How could such a person not think carefully before doing anything? How could such a person make a decision that was child's play? After thinking this through, Hu Chang naturally relaxed a lot. He thought about everything that had happened in the court. Minister Wang Ji had only said a few words to suppress Ming and also force the emperor to make a decision carefully. This already proved that Yang Qindong's safety was not a big problem. Of course, this did not prevent people from taking the risk to suddenly kill Yang Qindong. But if someone really did that, it would be the same as putting Bai Ming on the fire. This was not something that Dai Zong wanted to see. In order to avoid such a problem, he would even take the initiative to send people to protect Yang Qindong. As for calling his son over today, other than the necessary notification, he also had something to ask. Changning, you are still working in the embroidered uniform guard. You can see if there are any sudden changes. If there are, you must pay attention. Father, are you saying that someone will do something in desperation? No matter what, Hu Changning had been in the court for more than 10 years. He naturally understood his father's words. It's very possible, Hu Shao said with a solemn expression. There are some things that the emperor might not do, but it doesn't mean that the people below won't do it. You have to know that there are always some people who think that they are smart and can guess the emperor's intentions. And these conceited people are often the ones who ruin things. Not everyone in the world is as smart as Shi Wanshan. Clearly, Hu Zhao's words meant that he had seen through Shi Wanshan's thoughts. Logically speaking, this person was the first to come into contact with Yang Qindong, and he was the most likely person to solve the problem. For example, he could directly send troops to capture Yang Qindong, or even kill him, and send his head to the capital. If he did that, Dai Zong would definitely be very happy. But this way, Shi Wanshan would be in danger. How could the mercenaries let him go? It was even possible that in order to appease the anger of the mercenaries, Dai Zong would personally give the order to punish Shi Wanshan. If that was really the case, it would be the same as jumping into the Yellow River, and he would never be able to wash away his guilt. Shi Wanshan wouldn't be able to see these things, which was why he let Yang Qindong enter the pass. Then he would send him back 800 li in an urgent manner, and this matter would have nothing to do with him anymore. This method of transferring responsibility was played beautifully, and it would also solve his own safety, but it would also incur Dai Zong's displeasure. Of course, preserving his life was more important. As for whether Dai Zong would be happy or what kind of methods he would use in the future, Hu Shao didn't bother to guess. This matter had nothing to do with him, so why should he think about it? At this moment, it was better to find out more about the embroidered uniform guard. If someone wanted to act rashly, he would be prepared. Yes, father, this child understands. Hu Changning understood his father's meaning and immediately expressed his attitude. Although the embroidered uniform guard had always been independent when it came to handling matters, and everyone usually carried out their own duties without interfering with each other, his so-called asking about the situation wouldn't yield any results. However, there were some things that couldn't be done without results. After all, Yang Qindong was a son-in-law, and as his father-in-law, he couldn't be indifferent when it came to performing. That's right, go back and tell the family that if there isn't anything important, they shouldn't go out. It's safer to stay in the residence. Hu Shao instructed Hu Changning again. Naturally, they had to pay more attention during this critical period. Yes, father, I'll arrange it in a moment. Hu Changning hurriedly responded. However, he didn't think so in his heart. In his opinion, he was an official of the embroidered uniform guard, and his father was a highly respected minister of rights. His students and old officials were all over the world, so who would find trouble with them? And it was this carelessness that doomed Hu Changning to suffer. Su Yojin, like the other important officials, hurriedly returned to the residence after leaving the palace. However, halfway there, he sent out his most loyal butler. Not long after he returned to the residence, the butler returned. At the same time, he brought back a message. Do what you normally do. These words naturally didn't come from the butler, but from the person the butler had gone to see. The intelligence agent Yang Qindong had left in the Bai Ming capital. Not even the two madams of the Yang clan knew that Yang Qindong had returned to the Bai Ming capital. It wasn't that he didn't trust them, but that he didn't want them to worry, so he had concealed everything. But Yang Qindong naturally wouldn't hide anything from the Security Bureau. He had even made arrangements for officials like Su Yojin, who had secretly joined Yang Qindong. Do what you normally do. Su Yojin repeated the words several times in a row. Her face was cloudy and uncertain. It seemed that the sixth young master had already made preparations, and for his own safety, he didn't need to intervene. Thinking about the various things Yang Qindong had done and the various miracles he had created, Su Yojin wasn't as panicked. But thinking about his recent actions and how he had even rarely contacted the people of the Security Bureau, would that incur the displeasure of the Duke of Loyalty? Su Yojin was a smart person, and he was very good at judging the situation. It was precisely because of this that when he saw the new army in Ming gradually taking shape, his attitude changed, and he wanted to join Yang Qindong's ship. But when he heard that the Duke of Loyalty was coming to Ming capital, he hesitated. In the imperial court, when he learned that Yang Qindong had only brought 200-some cavalry to the capital, he had been worried. Of course, only he knew whether he was worried about Yang Qindong's safety or whether he was worried that he would be implicated if Yang Qindong was captured. For this reason, he had been worried the entire way. He couldn't understand why Yang Qindong would take such a risk in such a good situation. Could it be that he wasn't afraid of death? But now he was finally at ease. Since Yang Qindong had no intention of exposing him, he would just sit on the side and watch the show. He believed that since he had said so, the sixth young master wouldn't be in danger. In contrast to Su Yojin's initial shock, Zhu Qiyu was glaring angrily at the three servants kneeling in front of him. These three were great eunuch Jining of the Ceremony Directorate, Commander Lu Gui of the Brocade Guard, and Deng Chong, the eunuch guarding the Xian residence. Chapter 787. Deng Chong was the guardian eunuch of the Xian Manor, which was equivalent to patrolling the entire Xian Manor for the emperor. But now, Yang Qindong had safely passed through the Xian Manor without suffering any reprimand. Naturally, Zhu Qiyu would vent his anger on Deng Chong, the eunuch. Kneeling on the ground, Deng Chong trembled all over. At this moment, he hated Shi Wanshan to the core. The Duke of Loyalty and Courage had arrived in front of you, yet all you needed to do was speak and capture him, or even kill him. Why did you have to send him out of Xian City and into the capital? Wasn't this the same as trying to make the emperor look bad? Of course, at this moment, Deng Chong wasn't thinking about Shi Wanshan. In his view, whether the emperor was happy or not was always the most important thing. As for the officials below him, so what if they died? Servants would always be servants. Deng Chong was a member of the eunuch group. He was originally Jinying's subordinate. If a subordinate did something wrong, it was only right for him, the superior, to kneel and be punished. Moreover, Jining knew that the emperor was not in a good mood, so she didn't show any anger as she knelt on the ground. Lu Gui, on the other hand, had a wronged expression. Deng Chong being punished to kneel was only right and proper. The problem occurred in your Xian Manor. You didn't resolve it properly and threw the problem in front of the emperor. If he didn't punish you, who would he punish? As for Jining, she was Deng Chong's superior, so it was only right for her to be punished. But he had no relationship with Deng Chong, so why did he have to be punished? Wasn't this too unjust? He was angry, but he didn't dare to vent it. Lu Gui knelt there with his head lowered, cursing in his heart. Zhu Qiyu sat high above, looking at the three people kneeling in front of him. He snorted, "Do you know your crime?" This subject knows his crime, Jining and Deng Chong hurriedly said. Just from the fact that they could call themselves subjects, one could imagine the power of the eunuch group. The two of them answered, and Lu Gui had no choice but to speak. This subject knows his crime. He spoke, but it was a beat too slow, causing his voice to be particularly conspicuous. "What? Lu Gui, do you think you're innocent? Is your embroidered uniform guard really not at fault this time?" The Duke of Zhongdan suddenly entered the Xian Manor. "Did your people report it? Is there any way to deal with it?" On the way out of the Xian Manor, there were countless checkpoints. What did the brocade guard do? Shouldn't I punish you? The emperor suddenly got angry and angrily scolded. Cold sweat flowed out from Lu Gui's head. Speaking of Yang Qindong's arrival at Xian Manor, the embroidered uniform guard stationed there were indeed aware of it. However, the problem was that before they could make any decisions, Shi Wanshan had sent Yang Qindong and the others away early the next morning, catching them off guard. As a result, by the time they wanted to send someone to follow them, there was already no trace of them. It was winter, and the northwest wind was blowing. The snow marks on the ground would soon disappear. Even the shadow of the person could not be tracked, so how could they take any action? But how could Lu Gui dare to say these words to the emperor? Wouldn't that prove his incompetence? At this moment, he could only obediently lower his head and accept the scolding. At this moment, he didn't feel so wronged. It seemed that it was natural for him to kneel here. The three people didn't resist or refute. Gradually, Dai Zong's anger dissipated. You all know what happened. Now, I'll give you a chance to make up for your mistakes. Who will tell me what you plan to do next? He was about to make a move. Lu Gui, who didn't perform well just now, quickly raised his head and said in a fierce voice, Your Majesty, leave this matter to the subject. I'll immediately send people to set up surveillance around the capital. I'll make sure that he's a corpse before he enters the capital. Moreover, I'll make sure that his hands and feet are done cleanly. No one will know. No one will know? Zhu Qiyu sneered. The Duke of Zhongdan has more than 200 cavalrymen by his side, and they all carry advanced firearms. Can you really eliminate all of them and not leave any trace? This. For a moment, Lu Gui didn't dare to make any guarantees. He already knew how powerful the mercenaries were. If it was just one person or a few people, it wasn't impossible to mobilize the elites of the embroidered uniform guard. But against more than 200 fully armed cavalrymen, if they wanted to deal with them, they would need to mobilize many embroidered uniform guards. Perhaps even 1,000 men wouldn't be enough. And once they mobilized more people, it would be extremely difficult to keep the news from spreading. The embroidered uniform guard had too many officials, family members serving in it. The various departments should also have people in them. To mobilize so many people without being noticed was basically an impossible task. After being choked by Dai Zong, Lu Gui lowered his head and didn't say anything. But this reminded Jin Ying that he had thought of something. Your Majesty, the Duke of Zhongdan isn't easy to deal with. If we don't hit him, we'll have to bear a great risk. But that doesn't mean that we can't touch the others. When Zhu Qiyu heard the first part of Jin Ying's words, his face showed displeasure. But when he heard the latter part, his spirit was lifted. He knew that this highly regarded head eunuch must have thought of something. Oh, tell me about it. Although we can't directly touch the Duke of Zhongdan, we can use other people to probe his thoughts. This way, we can indirectly obtain some results. After all, the Duke of Zhongdan is Lord Yang Rong's youngest son. In the capital, he has close connections to all sorts of people. For example, he has tensome older brothers and sisters. No, this action is too obvious. Zhu Qiyu didn't even wait for Jining to finish speaking and immediately refused. Yang Qindong had older brothers and sisters in the capital, but touching them was no different from touching Yang Qindong. More importantly, this person could sacrifice his family. Bai Ming would not only gain nothing, but would also easily offend him. Jin Ying understood the emperor's meaning. Even though he had been interrupted, he didn't show any displeasure. On the contrary, he smiled and said, Just as your Majesty says, we truly can't use these family members. It's too obvious, but there are some people who aren't close to him, so we can use them to make a fuss. At the very least, we can test his bottom line. Without any intention of making Dai Zong wait, he gave a name. This time, Zhu Qiyu didn't immediately refuse. Instead, he fell into deep thought. Then he turned his gaze to Lu Gui, a questioning look on his face. His previous performance had already been very bad. He was afraid that he had incurred the emperor's displeasure. Now that he finally had a chance to perform, how could Lu Gui miss it? He nodded and said, "This person is fine." He was originally a member of the Brocade Guard. It's too easy to find fault with him. But his father is the current court. Knowing what Lu Gui was afraid of, Zhu Qiu decisively shook his head. "It's fine. Didn't you say that the Brocade Guard doesn't need to ask for a reason when arresting people? Don't you need to look at the other party's status? Since that's the case, just do it according to the old rules." Understood. Lu Gui was naturally a smart person to be able to reach his position. He nodded and said, "Rest assured, Your Majesty, this subject will definitely handle this matter beautifully." Finally, there was a countermeasure. Zhu Qiu's expression relaxed a lot. No matter what, Yang Qindong had returned to the capital of Baiming. The initiative was in his hands. He should be worried about the other party, not himself. He also wanted to use this time to take a good look at the thoughts of these officials. He also wanted to know who to put in important positions in the future and who to push to the side and be completely marginalized. Gao Sheng, Baihu of the Brocade Guard, was the trusted aide of the Brocade Guard's town supervisor, Hu Changning. Relying on his relationship with the Hu clan, Gao Sheng was like a fish in water in the Brocade Guard. His relationship with his colleagues had always been good. This was only relative. Everyone knew that the family rules of the Brocade Guard were extremely strict. One moment, everyone could be drinking together, hugging each other's neck and calling each other brothers. The next moment, the two of them would fight to the death. Although he knew of this rule, Gao Sheng never thought that he would have such a day. Putting aside the fact that he had a big tree to rely on, the Hu clan had never lacked money, thanks to the Duke of Loyalty. Often, the Tianwai Trading Company would send people to send them money and things. He also benefited from this. He did not lack money, and his lack of greed made his position extremely high. There would not be anything that could be used against him in the outside world. However, when Gao Sheng, who believed that he was honest and had never done anything wrong, stepped into the Brocade Guard's main gate one morning, he saw four fierce-looking men surrounding him. His intuition told him that things were not good. As he shouted out his identity, he thought about how to get out of the gate and find another way. However, how could the embroidered uniform guards not think of this? Before Gao Sheng could put his thoughts into action, the embroidered uniform guard surrounded him and pressed him to the ground without any explanation. Then a black cloth was placed over his head, and he was taken to the embroidered uniform guard's imperial prison. For hours later, at noon, when the streets of the capital were still bustling with activity, a group of embroidered uniform guards wearing flying fish robes, black gauze hats, imperial belts, and wielding embroidered spring sabers could be seen aggressively traversing the streets. This lineup caused many commoners and even some officials to hurriedly make way for them. This was the Brocade Guard. They did not need any evidence to arrest people. Sometimes, even when killing people, they did not need to follow so many rules. They really did not know who had offended them this time, which family was going to suffer this time. The crowd made way for the Brocade Guard to walk past them. A few busybodies even followed behind the Brocade Guard, wanting to see what was going on. Not long after, they saw a scene that shocked them. This group of Brocade Guard actually came to the residence of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, and loudly smashed the door. Chapter 788. As the oldest of the officials, Hu Shao had a large network of connections in the capital. Furthermore, he was upright and could be said to be a person of virtue and prestige. The embroidered uniform guards must have eaten the wrong medicine to dare to behave so atrociously in the Hu estate. The commoners naturally wanted to watch the show, but a few minor officials were mixed in with the commoners, their faces filled with fear. They naturally knew what the Hu estate represented. Normally, they would not be able to form a relationship with it. They did not even have the qualifications to enter the Hu estate's main gates or side gates. now that the embroidered uniform guards were about to make a move against the Hu estate. Did this not mean that a huge storm was about to arrive? If this was the case, it would affect which side they should take in the future. Of course, this was also a great opportunity. The embroidered uniform guards did not care about what the commoners thought. They were only here to complete the mission given to them by their superiors. After a round of banging on the door, the guard opened a small crack in the door. More than 20 embroidered uniform guards charged in, and for a moment, the entire Hu estate was thrown into chaos. The front courtyard suddenly became noisy, and the sounds of chaos could be heard from time to time. Hu Zhongning, who was in his study, frowned. He then put down the brush he was practicing calligraphy with and strode out of the study, heading straight for the front courtyard. At this moment, a group of embroidered uniform guards were standing in rows in the front courtyard, guarding the paths that led to the outside world. Then, an embroidered uniform guard Baihu loudly called out, "Is Hu Zhongning here? Tell him to come out and see me." Hu Zhongning had just reached the front courtyard when he heard these words. He loudly replied, "Hu Zhongning is here. Who is looking for me?" As he spoke, Hu Zhongning took steady steps and appeared in the front yard. He saw a group of embroidered uniform guards standing there. When he saw a servant of the Hu residence run around in fear and was even knocked to the ground, his face filled with anger as he asked, "What are you all doing? Why are you making things difficult for these servants? Who is your leader?" It was no wonder that Hu Zhongning was so angry. After all, he was still the town supervisor of the embroidered uniform guard, and ordinary embroidered uniform guard officials were nothing to him. "It's me." A Baihu official walked out of the brocade guard. He first sized up Hu Zhongning, and after confirming that he was the person he was looking for, he waved his sleeves, and in his hand appeared a driver's license, the token used by the brocade guard to arrest people. In a loud voice, he said, "Baihu Gaosheng is suspected of corruption and dereliction of duty, and this matter is related to Lord Hu. Please come with us and be investigated." "Gaosheng? What happened to Gaosheng?" In a moment of anxiety, Hu Zhongning could not help but blurt out, "I don't know what happened to him. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Now, Lord Hu, please come with us." The official looked coldly at Hu Zhongning, a trace of contempt and disdain in his eyes. The Hu clan truly was a prosperous clan, and its connections were deeply rooted in the capital. Even the emperor could meet them whenever he wanted. If it was an ordinary official, they naturally wouldn't dare to be disrespectful to the Hu family, but this didn't include the embroidered uniform guards. What kind of people were the embroidered uniform guards? They were the largest organization independent of the imperial court. They only took orders from the emperor. If they wanted someone to die in the middle of the night, they wouldn't wait until 5. How could such an organization place Hu Zhongning in their eyes? Moreover, based on this official's analysis, very few people who were targeted by the embroidered uniform guards would be able to return to their positions. Even if they were lucky, they would still be skinned alive. There were far too many people who couldn't even return to their positions. Even if he offended them now, they probably wouldn't have the ability to retaliate against him. Not only had Gao Xing been arrested, he had even sold him out, and he had also been charged with corruption and dereliction of duty. After hearing this, Hu Zhongning immediately understood what was going on. He had clearly been implicated by his son-in-law this time. He still remembered that his father had told him yesterday that he had to keep a low profile and that the people in the estate shouldn't casually leave unless there was an important matter. However, he had only instructed the servants in the estate and had forgotten to tell his trusted aide, Gao Sheng. He had forgotten to tell him to find a random reason to not go to the government office. This had allowed the other party to grab hold of his weakness. I was too careless. Hu Zhongning inwardly sighed and slowly raised his head. "Fine, I'll go with you. That would be for the best." The official still puffed out his chest and had an expression that said that this was how it should be. Hu Zhongning didn't care about this official's arrogant attitude. Instead, he thought of something and asked, "May I know your name, sir?" Why haven't I seen you before? After being questioned by Hu Zhangning, the official's expression turned sluggish. He didn't know how to answer. What? You're just a mere official. Yet you came to my estate to arrest someone. Now, you don't even dare to reveal your name? Then this old man will go back and ask His Majesty. It's fine if you don't want any evidence to arrest someone, but you don't even dare to reveal your name? Suddenly, an aged voice rang out, interrupting the Baihu standing there, as well as his hesitation and contemplation. The person who had come out was naturally the current Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. Such a huge matter had happened in the front courtyard, and the embroidered uniform guards had even killed their way into the estate to cause trouble. As the true master, how could he not show himself? At this moment, not only did he walk out, his face was filled with anger. Obviously, no one would be able to remain calm when they saw their son about to be captured. The official was momentarily stunned by Hu Zhao's imposing manner. He immediately blurted out, "This official Tong Lai greets Minister of Rights." This official was recently transferred back from the lower ranks. This time, I was only acting on orders. I hope Minister of Rights can forgive me. Tong Lai was so polite partly because he was affected by Hu Zhao's authority, and partly because he wanted to use this opportunity to make a name for himself. Just think about it, how awe-inspiring would it be to go to an official's estate to arrest someone, and the person arrested was even a young master? What was the difference between doing such a thing and not leaving one's name behind and traveling at night in brocade clothes? This was a good opportunity to make a name for himself, and he definitely didn't want to let it go. If he used this opportunity to reveal his name, he was sure that anyone who saw him in the future would be fearful of him. After Tong Lai reported his name, he raised his head to look at Hu Zhangning. Hu Zhao's authority was very strong, and Tong Lai couldn't look him in the eye. However, he still dared to look him in the eye since he was the head of the embroidered uniform guards. Official Tong, right? How about this? I'll go with you now. Hu Zhangning's tone was very calm. Then he turned to his father and bowed. Father, this child will go with them now. Don't worry, it won't be a big matter. Go with peace of mind. Father has his own plans. Hu Zhao's expression also didn't change as he spoke. Of course, he knew very well that he was also the seedling in the pond who had made such a move. It was obvious that there was someone who wanted to deal with Yang Qindong, but they didn't dare to go forward and test him. Thus, they came to the Hu clan's head, wanting to use this to test Yang Qindong's intentions. Since he couldn't avoid it, he might as well cooperate. Thinking about it, with the Hu clan's reputation here and the fact that he hadn't done anything wrong, the embroidered uniform guards shouldn't be able to do anything to his son. Once Yang Qindong arrived at the capital, they could properly discuss how to save him. After bowing to his father, Hu Zhangning placed his hands behind his back and leisurely followed Tong Lai and the others out of the Hu clan estate. Countless people outside the Hu clan estate saw this scene, and the news quickly spread throughout the capital. Logically speaking, when the brocade guard wanted to capture someone, they didn't need to create such a big commotion, but this time they did. This was also Commander Lu Gui's intention. He wanted to use this method to tell Yang Qindong, who was about to enter the capital, that his father-in-law had been captured by them. Could it be that he was still indifferent? Even if he didn't want to get involved in this matter, everyone in the streets now knew about it. If he didn't do anything, it would have a massive impact on his reputation. One could say that this was an attempt to coerce Yang Qindong, and he had no choice but to respond. Hu Zhangning had been captured, and regardless of the reason, it was a fact that he had been taken away in public. As a result, the entire capital was shrouded in an extremely uneasy mood. Even after 3 days had passed, the emperor still had not summoned any of his important officials to discuss how to deal with the Duke of Loyalty. From this, it could be seen that the emperor already had a plan. And this was the truth. Hu Zhangning's capture had been a ploy by the enemy, and now it was up to Yang Qindong to deal with it. After all, he had more than 200 black cavalry with him. Although they were all nimble brothers, even if the men could endure it, the horses couldn't. Moreover, their equipment was heavier than that of ordinary cavalry, so they could only make stops along the way. By the time they passed Jeong Pass and finally reached the foot of the capital, half a month had passed. In the distance, they could already see the lofty walls. Yang Qindong took in a deep breath. After more than a year, he was finally back at the foot of the capital, and he felt rather emotional. After all, his status was completely different from before, and the strength he displayed was also on a completely different level. Beta Persei excitedly asked, "Young master, should we enter the city first or go straight to the Yang clan manor?" Yang Si and Yang Lu were still in the Yang clan manor, and they had been extremely close to each other. Now that they were about to reunite, their joy was naturally indescribable. "Let's return to the manor first." Yang Qindong had a faint smile on his face. It had been a long time since he had seen his two madams, and he had missed them greatly. He had left them here for more than a year, so he felt rather guilty. Since he had returned and had even taken the risk to come back, he naturally had to take his two madams with him. If not for this, he wouldn't have needed to personally return and make the various factions so nervous. The cavalry changed directions. Instead of entering the capital through the western gate, they circled around the city walls and headed for the Yang clan manor, 15 li south of the city. Chapter 789. It was noon in the snowy Yangjia village. Smoke rose from the chimneys, and from afar it looked like a paradise on earth. Ever since Yang Qindong left the Yangjia village more than a year ago, this place had been under military management. Yang Lu led a platoon of Cold Vanguard to ensure the safety of this place. Their muskets were loaded, and they were ready for battle at any moment. This string had been stretched taut for more than a year. Fortunately, Yang Qindong had won many battles outside. Good news came one after another, which further stabilized the position of this place. Ordinary rascals did not dare to come here to make trouble, so they passed by without any mishaps. But all this tranquility was broken today, when more than 200 black cavalry soldiers came from afar, causing the ground to tremble. The entire Yangjia village became extremely tense. Yang Lu immediately led a platoon of soldiers to the front of the village and formed a battle formation. No matter who it was, they would have to pay a heavy price to get close. It was no wonder that Yang Lu and the others were so nervous. A few days ago, news had come that the young master's father-in-law had been captured by the Imperial Secret Service and had not been released. This seemed to be a signal that Ming was about to make a move, and they could not help but be nervous. But although his face was dark, the leader of the platoon, Yang Lu, was not afraid. This was because he knew that outside the village, around him, Xiao Feng was leading a platoon of Cold Vanguard soldiers to ambush him. If someone really wanted to harm the Yangjia village, he would appear with his army. The other 2 platoons of Cold Vanguard soldiers nearby would also come from all directions and attack together. Speaking of which, the Yangjia village did not have so many soldiers. In the past, Xiao Feng was only a company commander. However, not long ago, 6th Young Master had personally sent a telegram to appoint Xiao Feng as the regiment commander. Not only had he appointed him as the regiment commander, he had also sent him many Cold Vanguard soldiers who had excellent results in their training. They were all elite soldiers who wielded the 95 style. With the existence of this regiment of thousands of people, Yang Lu was confident in facing all enemies. The caravan was getting closer and closer. They had already slowed down. He couldn't see the identity of the person from afar, but Yang Lu thought that the enemy must have known that the Yang village was heavily guarded, so they wanted to test the waters carefully. The cavalry was indeed probing, but they were not probing the reaction speed and combat strength of Yang Qindong and the others, but they were constantly observing the surrounding situation. This was also the intention of Yang Qindong himself. This group of horses was the 200-odd black cavalry led by Yang Qindong. Among them were 2 members of the guards, Wolf's Fang and the Ghost Sniper team. It could be said that they were all elites among elites. Previously, Lu Gui had wanted to send people to wipe out this group of people. Fortunately, he did not do so. Otherwise, not to mention 1,000 men, even if 2 or 3 teams came, they would not be able to gain much advantage. In the face of the black cavalry armed with firearms and even rocket launchers, especially Yang Qindong, who could mobilize countless advanced weapons from the large warehouse at any time, sending fewer soldiers was no different from sending them to their deaths. There are people in the woods on the left, and there are also people in the snow on the right. There are at least 100 muzzles aimed at us. Yang Qindong rode on the white dragon horse and walked forward leisurely. With a smile on his face, he told these words to the people around him. Yang Qindong's perception was very strong. As a person of 2 lifetimes, and with the help of his ki, it was far from what ordinary people could compare to. Just like Beta Persei and the others, although they were also very strong, they could not sense these things. However, since the 6th young master said, so it must be so. Young master, with so many muzzles aimed at us, we should show our identities first. Otherwise, it would be too unjust for us to beat up our own people, Beta Persei said with an ugly expression when he heard that there were so many muzzles aimed at them. If they were really injured by the enemy on the battlefield, as long as they did not die, this wound could even become a kind of honor and something to brag about to the outside world. However, if they were beaten up by their own people, then no matter what the result was, they would not have the face to tell outsiders. Okay, go ahead. Yang Qindong nodded and agreed to this suggestion. Although he had confidence in Lung Feng, since he could become Lung Feng, he must be an outstanding person in all the assessments. However, a horse could stumble, so it was better not to be too arrogant. After receiving the order, Beta Persei spurred his horse forward. However, with him running in front, the situation would not be tense no matter what. After all, he was only one person, and even if he did not use any weapons, it was impossible for him to charge into the Yang village. He spurred his horse forward, bringing up snowflakes one after another, making it difficult for people to see his appearance clearly. In the past, it was rare for the capital to have such heavy snow at this time. However, it happened this year, and some people even came out to say that it was a good year, which made the people very happy. Even the 2 madams in the village were very happy to see such heavy snow. In order to make them happy, Yang Lu did not immediately order people to clear the snow. This also made Beta Persei the target of the muzzles as he ran. It was only when he was 300 meters away from the Yang village that he took the initiative to stop his horse. This was a safe area outside the security perimeter, and if he continued forward, Lung Feng might open fire. Beta Persei's warhorse had just stopped when Yang Lu's shout came from the opposite side. "Who are you? Report your identity and put down your weapons." "Ha. But Yang Lu, I'm your second brother, ha. The heroic and loud voice pierced through the air and reverberated in the air. This roar was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the heart of Yang Lu, who was holding a self-made loudspeaker and shouting. He was very familiar with this voice, especially that naturally loud voice, which was unique to Beta Persei. At a distance of 300 meters, he didn't need to use any means to clearly transmit every word he said into his ears. It was as if he was talking in his ear. Only second brother Yang could do this. "Quick, binoculars. The excited Yang Lu hurriedly reached out to the platoon leader of Lung Feng. Logically speaking, at a distance of 300 meters, as long as he looked carefully, he should be able to see clearly without any obstacles. However, Yang Lu could not wait any longer to confirm his thoughts. The binoculars were finally in his hands. From afar, Beta Persei's grinning face was clearly visible. At this time, Yang Lu did not care about battlefield discipline at all. He suddenly changed from his original lying position to a standing position, then waved his big hands and shouted, "Big brother Beta Persei! Big brother Beta Persei! I'm Yang Lu! Ha, I knew it was you." Beta Persei laughed as he rode his horse. This time, No one had any intention of shooting at him. There was only one person coming. Yang Lu was jumping and shouting excitedly on the other side. It was obvious that he was an acquaintance. At a distance of 300 meters, the war horse charged in front of him. Beta Persei jumped off his horse and landed beside Yang Lu. He then punched the other party's shoulder. "Haha, long time no see. How are you?" Beta Persei used a lot of strength in this punch. Even though Yang Lu's body was not bad, he still took 2 steps back before he could stand firm. Then he pretended to be in pain and said, "Ouch, it hurts, it hurts." "Big brother Beta Persei, your strength has increased again." "Of course, haha, don't you see who I'm with?" Beta Persei was grinning when he suddenly thought of something. His expression changed, and he said, "Oh, the young master is behind me. Look at me. I only want to catch up with you. Quick, send the signal to all the soldiers to put down their guns. Turn off the safety, and don't point the muzzles at anyone." In Beta Persei's heart, the young master's safety was always the top priority. Even if it was a reunion between brothers, he would still put it aside first. Yang Lu was also shocked by this sentence. He knew that the 6th young master had returned to the capital, but in his opinion, Beta Persei should be the vanguard. There should still be some time before the young master returns. He never thought that the young master would be behind him. He was so excited that he hurriedly said to the soldier beside him, "Quick, raise the flag and pass down Big Brother Beta Persei's order." The token was spread in the wind, and the news spread in all directions. The order was quickly given, and the soldiers of the Cold Vanguard Battalion who were lying in ambush were all extremely excited. The 6th young master was back. He was a god in their hearts, and countless people wanted to see the 6th young master again. Now that the opportunity had finally appeared, everyone was inexplicably excited. Xiao Feng, who had just been promoted to regiment commander, was also excited. Back then, he was left in the capital by the 6th young master to watch over the safety of the place. It was impossible to say that he did not have any thoughts, but someone had to do it. Not all soldiers had to rush to the front line. Now that the telegram had finally arrived, he was directly promoted from a company commander to a regiment commander. This was the greatest reward that Yang Qindong had given him for his efforts. Now that he knew that the 6th young master had returned, he was of course even more excited and agitated. But this did not go to his head. In his excitement, he gave orders to his subordinates. Everyone still has to be on guard. The 6th young master is here, and the Bai Ming may act excessively at any time. From now on, we have to keep a clear head. If the enemy appears, it will be our chance to perform well in front of the 6th young master. Yes. The soldiers around him all agreed in unison and then went to their respective duties. However, the muzzles of their guns were not aimed at the 200 or so black cavalry, but at the back of the black cavalry to prevent a Bai Ming army from suddenly appearing there. Beta Persei met up with Yang Lu, and then the outer gate leading to the Yang residence was completely opened. Yang Qindong arrived soon after and rode his warhorse to the front of a platoon of 30 soldiers beside Yang Lu. "Salute!" Yang Lu shouted, leading his Cold Vanguard platoon to raise their right arms, making a standard salute. Chapter 790. Yang Qindong dismounted from his horse and looked at the soldiers. He came to Yang Lu's side and nodded after returning the greeting. "You've done well. Thank you for your hard work." "6th young master, thank you for your hard work." Yang Lu took the lead and shouted. He faced the soldiers of the cold front and returned their greetings. Then he tidied their uniforms to show his concern. This trick was often used in the army and movies of later generations, but it had to be said that it was very useful. Many soldiers showed excited expressions because of this, and some even had tears in their eyes. These soldiers had been guarding this place for more than a year. They were tense every day. It was indeed very hard. Yang Qindong comforted them and encouraged them in this way. After greeting a platoon of soldiers, Yang Qindong got back on his horse and went straight to the Yang Manor. The mood and atmosphere in the Yang Manor were a little tense. First Madame Hu Yan's father was captured by the embroidered uniform guards. Then there was the sound of a large number of cavalry approaching the manor. Inside the manor, Qiao Yin and Lady Xiang became nervous. At this moment, they had temporarily forgotten that Yang Qindong was returning to the manor. They were worried. What if it was the northern Ming army outside? Could those 30 or so soldiers really stop it? What if they couldn't stop them? First Madame Hu Yan was not here. Qiao Yin had been in charge of everything here for more than a year. As a maid who had grown up with Yang Qindong, Qiao Yin had a gentle personality, but she also had a strong side. 3 daggers suddenly appeared in his hand. He kept one for himself and gave one each to Madame Shui and Yang Duo, who were beside him. Take it. If everything goes well, this thing will come in handy. In short, we must not fall into the hands of the Baiming army. Seeing Qiao Yin, who had always been well-behaved and docile, suddenly take out a dagger, this sharp contrast caused Lady Xiang and Yang Duo to be stunned. However, after considering that if the northern Ming army really attacked, they were afraid that if they were captured, their lives would be worse than death. The 2 women only hesitated for a moment before taking the dagger. Their attitude was extremely resolute, but when they really held the dagger in their hands, one could still see their nervousness and fear. After all, they were just weak girls. If they really wanted to kill themselves with this thing, it would require a lot of courage. Suicide was not something that could be done easily. When it came down to it, how many people couldn't do it? Qiao Yin also knew that this kind of preparation was not enough. Perhaps she didn't have confidence in herself, or perhaps she didn't have confidence in others. In short, she didn't relax because of this. She looked at Jiang Ping, who was standing 3 meters in front of the door, and said, "You've seen it. If none of us can do it later, we'll have to trouble you." "I understand, second madam." Jiang Ping nodded. As Tai Chingyi's former assistant, she was left behind by Yang Qindong in the Yang Manor to protect the safety of the 2 madams. She knew very well what would happen if something really happened. Perhaps death would be a relief for the madams. Qiao Yin nodded at Jiang Ping, as if to express her gratitude. Then she looked at Lady Xiang and Yang Shui and said, "Don't worry. If something happens to us today, our husband will definitely avenge us." The inner courtyard had already prepared for the worst. In the outer courtyard's Yang Academy, the second dean, Wang Si, was standing in the field of the study, full of righteous indignation as he cheered all the students on. The Yang Academy, as the school that Yang Qindong had founded, had high hopes for, and had produced many talents. They were all cadres and important roles in the various departments in Qiqian City, and one of their qualifications was that they were the first batch of students to graduate from the Yang Academy. As a student who had also graduated from the first batch, Wang Si didn't know where his former classmates had gone, but his intuition told him that these people would definitely be put in important positions. The more he came into contact with Yang Shui, the more profound this feeling became. Yang Shui. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was broad and profound, and even unfathomable. The knowledge learned here involved all kinds of problems, such as astronomy, geography, physics, mathematics, management, medicine, manufacturing, science, and so on. Even philosophy and the study of life were sometimes discussed. It was far from the way of Confucius and Mencius, like the old masters of the great Ming dynasty. They were full of benevolence, righteousness, and morality, and articles on the study of the saints, but in reality, when it came to the real governance of the world, the help they could provide was very limited. It was precisely because he understood Yang Qindong's characteristics and strength that Wang Si was unable to extricate himself from it. Moreover, because of his background, he bravely took over the position of the second dean. In the end, while learning, it was also equivalent to helping Yang Qindong manage and nurture more talents. After 2 years of development, the reputation of the Yang Academy had already spread far and wide, and 2 batches of students had also graduated. However, Wang Si remembered Yang Qindong's teachings when he left and kept all of these people, not letting a single one of them go. This wasn't because he cherished talent. Although these people did play a role in the development of the Yang Academy, he did this for their own good. This was because he knew that those who had learned Yang Shui were in fact not suitable to establish themselves in the great Ming dynasty, where Confucius and Mencius were everywhere. Their thinking was completely different, and if he let these people into society, they would only cause trouble and bring trouble to themselves. He didn't want to see these graduates, who had learned a wealth of knowledge with great difficulty, be erased by this ruthless society or even bring disaster upon themselves. Thus, Wang Si kept these people. Fortunately, the wealth that Yang Qindong had allocated to the academy had always been very rich, so it wasn't a problem to feed these people. And because of the existence of these people, the Yang Academy had also developed more and more. Every year, when they recruited new students, they would carefully select them, but every year there would still be 100 students left. Until now, the total number of students and teachers who had stayed behind after graduation in the Yang Academy had already reached 400. Wang Si had also become the dean in name, and the real test had really come. First, it was his grandfather who summoned him and warned him to be careful. Then there was news that the father-in-law of the 6th young master, Hu Zhongning, had been arrested by the embroidered uniform guards and imprisoned. Now, the entire Yang family manor suddenly sounded the alarm. All of this made Wang Si even more worried. Not long after the alarm sounded in Yang family manor, he summoned all the teachers and students to the sports field. Although the weather outside had already reached -5 or 6 degrees, it didn't make them feel cold at all. On the contrary, everyone was hot-blooded as they looked at the dean, Wang Si, who was standing at the highest point of the sports field. Everyone was waiting for his decision. To be able to become a student of the Yang Academy, it wasn't just learning literature. They belonged to the category of all-rounders who were proficient in both civil and martial arts. This was especially true for the students who had graduated before. Individually, they already had the skills of a B-class soldier. Compared to A-class soldiers like Lung Feng, they were naturally weaker, but compared to the ordinary soldiers of the great Ming dynasty, their physical fitness was already better. After all, they ate well, wore warm clothes, and had no worries, so they could use all their strength during training. There were even these students in the shooting class, and some of them even had good shooting results. With 5 bullets, they could get an excellent score of 45 points. Most of them also got a passing score of 38 points. At this time, they were all holding long swords or broadswords, as if they were ready to rush to the enemy and fight face to face. Even a few women standing in the crowd were also clenching the long swords in their hands, looking unwilling to admit defeat. Among them, there was a very beautiful figure. She came very early and was already a celebrity in the Yang Academy. She also became a teacher of Japanese, the Princess Junko. Yang Qindong left here more than a year ago, but she was left behind. Even the guard captain, Xiaolin, had already left. Junko, who was all alone, quickly became a member of the Yang Academy. With the 6th young master gone, Junko couldn't go in and out of the inner courtyard of the Yang village like before. Everyone in the Yang village didn't know how to treat her. After all, with her outstanding appearance, she might become the madam at any time. Fortunately, she knew what to do. Although she was young, she didn't stay in the Japanese Empire's palace for nothing. Although she was young, her mind was already mature. During Yang Qindong's absence, she behaved very well. Unless it was a major festival, she would never enter the inner courtyard of the Yang village to greet the 2 madams. As her heart sank, Princess Junko felt more and more that the things taught in the Yang Academy were profound and broad. She tried to absorb this rich knowledge and imagined that one day when she could return to China, she could pass it on and make her own contribution to the strengthening of the Japanese Empire. But the sudden danger interrupted her plan. Ming was going to attack the Yang village? Didn't they have to worry about the loyal duke who led the powerful mercenaries? Were they crazy? From Junko's point of view, this possibility shouldn't exist. Even if the Yang village was in danger, it shouldn't be at this time. At least, before Yang Qindong appeared, there shouldn't be any hidden danger. She wanted to tell these thoughts to Dean Wangxi, but when she saw that he was passionately working for everyone at the moment, as if he would rush out at any time to fight the Baiming army, she knew that it was useless to say anything at this moment. Chapter 791. Wang Si was still performing, but his eyes were always paying attention to the movements outside the academy. As soon as there was a gunshot outside, he would rush out with the 400 people and apply what he had learned in actual combat. For this, he felt his whole body was excited. But then this excitement came to an abrupt end because of Yang Lu's sudden appearance. Dean Wang, it's all a misunderstanding. It's not an enemy, but the 6th young master is back. What? The Duke of Loyalty is back? Wang Si only hesitated for a moment, then shouted in surprise. Yes, the young master is now in the inner courtyard. He should come to see you in a while. You just need to be prepared. Yang Lu smiled and nodded. He just came to deliver the news. Since the news had arrived, of course, he would not stay here. It was not easy for the young master to come back. He should show his face in front of him and show off. Yang Lu had left, and the Yang Academy was also in an uproar. Then, Wang Si's shout came out. Hurry, clean up immediately. Let's welcome the dean in our best state. Everyone hurriedly shouted after hearing the order. Junko was the same, but her cheeks were already red. Perhaps only she knew what was in her heart. Yang Village's inner courtyard. Yang Si was guarding here with his people. The safety of the gun had been opened, and it looked like he was going to shoot at any time. But when Yang Qindong suddenly appeared in front of him, everything changed. Yang Si, who was not prepared at all, could only laugh foolishly. It was not until the slightly towering figure came in front of him and patted him on the shoulder that he habitually stood at attention and said, "Greetings, young master." "Hello, you've worked hard," Yang Qindong said with emotion, then laughed and said, "Wait a while, I'll take care of things and drink with you." "Okay, I'll wait for the young master's call at any time." Yang Si was very excited. Since the young master had returned, the Yangjia village would be safe. Even though the young master had only brought 200 black knights with him, he was still confident. "Where are the 2 madams?" Yang Qindong's voice echoed in Yang Si's ears as he walked towards the inner courtyard. "2nd madam, 4th madam, and 7th sister are all in the inner courtyard." "All right, I got it." Yang Qindong's voice was heard again, but his figure had already disappeared after he finished speaking. In the inner courtyard, 2 madams and a young lady were holding their daggers tightly with nervous expressions. They looked as if they were saying, "Don't mess with me, otherwise I'll stab you with my dagger." The only one who was relaxed was Jiang Ping. Her gaze was deep and her face was filled with determination. At this moment, she was already prepared to die. Her duty was to protect the safety of the 2 madams. If she could not do this, then she would not let the 2 madams be carried by others. She would first help the 2 madams complete their original destiny. Then she would fight the enemy to the last drop of blood, and then go to the ground to accompany the 2 madams. This was her destiny. 2 years ago, when she and her sister Tai Jie appeared in the Yang Academy, their destiny was already set. Jiang Ping had already prepared for this day. Although she hadn't seen her sister for more than a year, the 2 of them could still write letters to each other. In her letters, Tai Jie could mention the name of Crimson City and some things that happened there. This was a rule. However, she told Jiang Ping in her letters that the 6th young master was doing something groundbreaking, and this path was destined to be full of thorns and dangers. They were fortunate enough to be able to participate in this matter. It was something to be proud of, but at the same time it was also very dangerous. They had to be prepared to sacrifice themselves and die at any time. Jiang Ping engraved these words in her heart. She thought that now was the time to fulfill these words. For this reason, the Browning pistol that Yang Qindong had personally given her had already been unlocked. She was ready to kill the enemy or even commit suicide at any time. This situation was getting closer and closer as the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. The footsteps came in an orderly manner, as if they were stepping on a drum. Every time they landed, the emotions of the women in the room would be stirred. They all raised their heads and looked outside the door, waiting for the judgment of fate. The sound got closer and closer, and the atmosphere became more and more tense. For some reason, at this moment, even Jiang Ping felt a powerful pressure. Instinctively, she held the Browning pistol in her hand and aimed it outside the door. In this critical period, no action was excessive, and any caution was reasonable. The figure finally appeared. Jiang Ping, who was the closest to the door, was the first to see the face of the person. Her first impression was that the person who came was not someone from the inner courtyard of Yang Manor. Then her eyes widened. How is this possible? Of course, the person Jiang Ping saw was Yang Qindong. It was a tense moment outside, and everyone's heart was in their mouths. At this moment, no one would have thought that the sixth young master would suddenly return at this time. Jiang Ping was completely stunned. She, who was not mentally prepared, did not know how to speak at this moment. The only thing she could do was to lower the muzzle of her gun. After all, the sixth young master appeared here and pointed a gun at him. It was a great disrespect. Even if she were to die immediately, no one would cry out for her. "You're not bad." The first person to see him was Jiang Ping. Seeing that he was loaded and the safety was off, she nodded deeply. This was the quality that a captain of the guard should have. Once there was danger, she would be on full alert. The voice was very soft, so soft that only Jiang Ping could hear it. However, this sentence pulled her excited heart back. She immediately straightened her body and gave a standard military salute. "Hello, sixth young master." Good. You've done a good job. Now you can go out and wait." He came in front of Jiang Ping and patted her shoulder to express his gratitude. At this time, the room was so silent that you could hear a pin drop. Qiao Yin, Lady Xiang, and Yang Duo were staring at the person who came in. They looked at the tall figure and the confident smile. Jiang Ping had already walked out without them noticing. When only the four of them were left in the room, Qiao Yin suddenly burst into tears. The dagger in her hand also fell to the ground at this moment, causing a very crisp sound. Then her beautiful figure quickly ran over and plunged into Yang Qindong's arms. "Young master, you're back." After following Yang Qindong for so long, Qiao Yin was still more used to calling him young master and not husband. Opening his arms and welcoming Qiao Yin into his embrace, Yang Qindong stretched out his arm and patted the other's back. He comforted her and said, "I'm back. Everything is over. No one will threaten your safety in the future." As he spoke, Yang Qindong looked at the 3 daggers that fell to the ground. At this moment, he had a smile on his face, but he was a little angry in his heart. Although the Ming imperial court didn't do anything to the Yang family village, looking at everything that happened now, the invisible pressure was still very huge. He actually dared to make his woman worry. Just based on this, he was afraid that he would have to take out a few heads to vent his anger. After Qiao Yin, 4th Madame Xiang also ran over and also burrowed into Yang Qindong's wide arms. Then the 2 women broke into tears and laughed. They laughed and cried and laughed again. At this moment, they completely expressed the worries that had been suppressed in the bottom of their hearts. In this regard, other than continuously patting their backs, Yang Qindong could only reveal a bitter smile as he looked at Yang Duo, who was standing 3 meters away. "Seventh sister, are you all right?" At this moment, Yang Duo's eyes were also filled with tears, but her face was full of smiles. This little brother of hers had finally returned. She sighed and said, "Now that you're back, everything is fine." "All right, I won't delay your reunion." I'll go to the kitchen to take a look and have them prepare delicious food. We must celebrate properly. Good, good. We have to celebrate properly. Thank you for your hard work, seventh sister. Yang Qindong also chuckled. He could only reveal such a straightforward smile in front of his sisters. Yang Duo also left. After waiting for there to be no one else in the room, Yang Qindong hugged one in each hand and kissed Xiao Yin and Lady Xiang's cheeks respectively. Then he stretched out his finger and scratched the bridge of their noses. This kind of action was commonly used by Yang Qindong towards his beloved women, but it was this kind of action that immediately caused the two women's faces to turn red, like red apples. Speaking of which, ever since Yang Qindong entered the new, or Gandusi region, and entered the grasslands, he had not touched a woman. Now that the soft fragrance was in his arms, it was impossible for him not to feel anything. Even his body had already reacted, and he couldn't wait to do the two of them on the spot. However, Yang Qindong was still rational. He knew that there were still many people outside waiting for him to appear. Now was not the time to be sentimental. Xiang, I've made you worry this time. But don't worry, this time I'm here to take you away. In the future, such worrying things won't happen again. Ah, really? Hearing that Yang Qindong was going to take them away, both Xiao Yin and Lady Xiang's faces were filled with excitement. Of course, I don't think I've lied to you before. Looking at the two women's smiles from the bottom of their hearts, Yang Qindong also chuckled. About half an hour later, Yang Qindong walked out of the inner court and arrived in front of Beta Persei, Yang Si and Yang Lu, who had been waiting for him. Come, let's go to the Yang Family Academy to take a look. The Yang Family Academy had long been prepared. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, the second dean, Wang Si, immediately led the students out to welcome him. Although it was cold outside, no one was affected by the weather. In their opinion, since the dean was here, they should all come out to welcome him. Considering the weather, Yang Qindong originally wanted to let these people return to the classroom first. However, looking at more than 400 people, he knew that there was no classroom that could accommodate so many people. He simply followed everyone's wishes and stood in the middle of the field where Wang Si stood before. Then a deep voice rang out. Chapter 792. Good, you all did well. As soon as they met, Yang Qindong praised everyone's performance. I've heard that you all thought there was an enemy invasion and were even prepared to fight in close combat. This courage is very good, and it fully shows your loyalty to the academy. After receiving Yang Qindong's affirmation and praise, everyone's face was filled with excitement. But Yang Qindong was still praising everyone a moment ago, but then his tone changed and his face became much more serious. But what you did was wrong. These words were somewhat contradictory, and everyone was confused. Even the second dean, Wang Si, couldn't wrap his head around it for a while. But before they could figure out what was going on, Yang Qindong continued, What you did was a bit inappropriate, and the mistake was in your position. You are not ordinary soldiers. You are students of the Yang faction. You are even teachers. We are the most precious treasures. If anything happens to any one of you, I will feel heartache for a long time. If all 400 of you fight together against the enemy, you will not be able to avoid life and death. Won't I die of heartache then? Are you willing to see my heart shatter into pieces? Ha! The students and teachers who laughed at Yang Qindong's analogy finally understood the dean's words, and they all burst out laughing. Junko in the crowd was also laughing, but it was a different kind of laughter. It was a kind of laughter as if she was blaming Yang Qindong for making such a joke at a time like this. As if he knew what she was thinking, Yang Qindong's eyes swept across the crowd and deliberately stayed on Junko for a while. It was this short pause that made Junko quickly lower her head. She didn't know why, but when faced with Yang Qindong's eyes, she found that her heart was beating fast like a deer. Well, maybe some of you think I'm joking, but I want to explain that this is not a joke, but a true thought from the heart. Speaking of which, the first batch of students is already very small. Have you not thought of asking where they went? Haha, I can tell you now. They have all gone to develop their own learning. Some of them are already in high positions, making great contributions, and have become the existence that everyone admires. Of course, you don't have to be envious, because it will soon be your turn. In the near future, you will go out alone and develop the Yang family. What I want to do is to create a good environment for you. As for the opportunity, are you confident that you can seize it? Yes. The answer was the excited voices of the students. Haha, let's have dinner tonight. Let's have a good talk as a farewell dinner. When you go out in the future, I hope that one day you can proudly pat your chest and tell everyone that you were once the students of the Yang Family Academy. Yang Qindong's excited voice was still echoing in the air above the academy. The students below looked at him seriously and excitedly, as if they saw their own limitless future and saw the great moment when they used their knowledge to change their fate. In the academy, Yang Qindong stayed for more than 2 hours. During this time, he listened to Wang Xi's report on the work of the academy. However, from beginning to end, Yang Qindong didn't comment on anything and just kept nodding. All this fell into Wang Xi's eyes. He thought that the 6th young master must have an idea in mind, but there were some things that needed to be carefully considered. However, since the 6th young master was back, he was of course not in a hurry. There were still more than 10 days before the new year, and there was no doubt that they would spend the new year here, so there was plenty of time to make a decision. That night, the Yang family village became a lively sea. The chefs all cooked their best dishes, just to express a kind of welcome for the 6th young master's return. In contrast, the imperial palace of Ming, 15 li away, was silent. The embroidered uniform guards, who had always kept a close eye on the Yang manor, received the news as soon as Yang Qindong returned to the manor. Then this news was sent to the acting sect master, Zhu Qiyu. Finally back? Humph. I want to see if you have made any progress after not seeing you for nearly 2 years. After taking a look at the report, he put it aside. Zhu Qiyu also closed his eyes because of this. Hu Zhangning had already been arrested and put in prison. Although he hadn't been tortured because of the other party's identity, the arrest itself was a kind of attitude. Now, they just had to wait and see how Yang Qindong would break out of this situation. Would he resist forcefully, lower his head and admit defeat, or would he arrange for someone to break the prison? At the thought of breaking the prison, Zhu Qiyu couldn't sit still. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Jining, who was standing beside him, and asked, "The security of the prison, of course." Jining knew what Zhu Qiyu was asking about. Without waiting for him to finish, he answered, "Your Majesty, please don't worry. The embroidered uniform guards have a large number of people lying in ambush there. Unless you don't come, you will be walking right into the trap." Hearing that there was already an arrangement there, Zhu Qiyu nodded in satisfaction. He closed his eyes again and sank into deep thought. To be honest, among the Ming dynasty emperors, whether it was Zhu Qijin or Zhu Qiyu, they were not incapable rulers. They had even worked hard to strengthen the Ming dynasty. Compared to some of the later Ming dynasty emperors, they were already qualified and could even achieve good results. Unfortunately, they were born at the wrong time. They met Yang Qindong, who had a large warehouse. This meant that their dream of strengthening the Ming dynasty could not be realized. Now, what they needed to see was how long they could hold on, or, in the end, whether the Ming dynasty would disappear silently or be defeated fiercely under resistance. Yang Qindong had long since made up his mind about this matter. The Ming dynasty was made up of Han people as the foundation. The Han people in the world were one family. Based on this, unless it was necessary, Yang Qindong did not want and would not take the initiative to use force against the Ming dynasty. Of course, if someone provoked him, it would be a different story. For example, after the meal, in a secret room in the inner manor, Yang Qindong met with Yang San, the director of the Security Bureau, and Xiao Feng, the commander of the Cold Front, who was stationed in the capital of Ming. The first person Yang Qindong met was Xiao Feng. This person was part of the first batch of veterans to follow Yang Qindong. Back in Jianing Prefecture, he had been trained as the first echelon commander of the Cold Front. With his seniority and ability, he should have become the commander long ago. In fact, it would not be a problem for him to take another step forward. Unfortunately, the situation in the capital of Ming was too complicated. Yang Qindong did not want to reveal too much of his strength here. He did not want to attract the vigilance and dissatisfaction of the Ming imperial court. As a result, although Xiao Feng was senior, he did not have the opportunity to lead more soldiers. This time, if not for the fact that Yang Qindong wanted to return to Ming and had enough strength to protect himself, it would have been difficult for Xiao Feng to become the commander. Commander Xiao, are you familiar with the situation in the army? How are their qualities? Are you able to obey orders? If you have any problems, you can tell me. If you can't solve it, this young master will solve it for you. Since he wanted to put military power in Xiao Feng's hands, Yang Qindong naturally had to fully support him. Thank you, sixth young master, for your concern. The quality of the soldiers is very high and everyone is very obedient. There won't be any problems, Xiao Feng said with satisfaction. In order to ensure the safety of the sixth young master, Crimson City had sent over many outstanding soldiers of the Cold Front. Perhaps because they knew that one of the orders was to ensure the safety of the sixth young master, all of them were extremely excited and obedient. They were afraid that if they were careless and got into trouble, they would be sent back to Crimson City. If that happened, it would be very difficult for them to stand out in the future. Using this advantage, Xiao Feng quickly established his own authority and took control of a group of Cold Front. Very good. Since you have control of the army, you must always have a string in your heart. This time, we might not need you at all, but once we do, you must fight fiercely and bring out your strength, understand? Yes, please rest assured, sixth young master. Our Cold Vanguard unit is always waiting for the military order. Once there is a battle, we will definitely do our best. We will definitely not tarnish the reputation of the Cold Vanguard unit. Xiao Feng's face was full of confidence as he spoke as if he was giving a military order. After Xiao Feng left, the second and last person to enter the secret room was the Security Bureau's director, Yang San. The matter in Crimson City had already come to an end. The Yang father and son, as well as the Security Bureau's director, Qin Shuquan, had been taken down. All that was left was to rectify the work style. Yang Qindong had not arranged for him to interfere in the later stages of the matter, so he would naturally protect silent. This time, the sixth young master was returning to Ming for the new year. This was an extremely important matter. As the head of the Security Bureau, he naturally had to be there personally to make arrangements. Only then could he be at ease. Yang San had returned with an even more important matter to do, and that was to apologize to Yang Qindong. He had to give an explanation for the misuse of Qin Shuquan, which had led to the incident in Crimson City. After entering the secret room, Yang San knelt on the ground. This head of the Security Bureau, who had always appeared deep and unfathomable in front of everyone, was now kneeling before Yang Qindong. No matter what Yang San's identity was, he was first and foremost a servant of the Yang clan. Just based on this kneeling was nothing. Yang Qindong had no intention of letting Yang San get up immediately. Instead, he drank his tea while listening to Yang San's report. Chapter 793. Yang San knelt there and recounted everything that happened to Yang Taizhu in Crimson City, including how Yang Taizhu was executed on the spot after the trial and how Yang Shan, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was removed from his post and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Yang Qindong had already seen the telegram and was well aware of the situation. Yang Qindong didn't have the slightest bit of pity for the fate of Yang Xie and his son. He had already given them enough benefits, and a golden path was laid out in front of them. However, some people just didn't want to reach out and grab it. They weren't satisfied and wanted to take the risk. They couldn't blame others for their fate. This was especially true for Yang Shan. He was not valued in the Southern Ming Empire and was even ostracized. In the end, he was sent to the Northern Ming Empire as an emissary. This was originally a very difficult mission to complete. If not for Yang Qindong's help, even if he could return from the Northern Ming Empire to the Southern Ming Empire, it was likely that his superior, the Minister of Rights, Liu De, would not give him any good results. Not only did he forget about such kindness, but he also wanted to obtain even more things from it. If Yu Mian hadn't told Yang Qindong all of this, he really didn't dare to imagine what would happen to Crimson City in the long run. Would there be a day when the palace would fall? Once the three madams fell into the enemy's hands, even if Yang Qindong wanted to do something, he would have to hold back. When he thought of how terrible the situation would become, Yang Qindong wanted nothing more than to kill Yang Shan. But in the end, Crimson City's Legal Affairs Committee sentenced him to 20 years in prison. Yang Qindong, who advocated the rule of law, naturally wouldn't say anything. If even he didn't respect the law, how could others respect it? Yang Qindong threw the matter of the Yang father and son to the side. He was more concerned about the military. He couldn't believe that the military didn't know anything about such a huge incident. Although the truth was that a battalion commander and 3 company commanders had been roped in by the Yang family, Yang Qindong still felt that something was amiss when the matter only involved such low-ranking officials. This time, he called Yang Sen over with the intention of questioning him face to face. "Tell me, this incident shouldn't only involve a battalion commander and 3 company commanders, right? Did Lung Song and Gao Xiong not know anything about it beforehand?" Yang Qindong's voice was calm, but the question he asked was very serious. One could imagine that if Yang Sen had a problem with someone, a slight twitch of his mouth would probably cause an unacceptable situation. The problem was that in front of Yang Qindong, even if Yang Sen had selfish motives, he wouldn't dare to show it. The appearance of the CIA was already a threat to the Security Bureau. It was believed that in the future, any important information would not be monopolized by the Security Bureau. It would have to go through the CIA's review. This made Yang Sen even more careful when he spoke. "Young Master, Commander Gao Xiong hasn't been on the island recently. I heard that some yellow-haired people and unknown ships suddenly appeared at sea. Now, the Navy's main target is those people. As for the Army, Commander Lung Song might have noticed something." Yang Sen was very careful with his words. Yang Qindong couldn't help but frown slightly. He knew very well what Yang Sen's words meant. When it came to a high-ranking official like Lung Song, one had to be very careful with their words. "And what do you mean by notice something? Tell me in detail." Yang Qindong put down his teacup and listened attentively. "Yes, young master, according to our investigation, Yang Taizhu had a close relationship with Commander Lung Song for a period of time. However, for some reason, the relationship between the two sides suddenly became cold. Afterwards, we also suspected that Yang Taizhu wanted to bribe Division Commander Lung. For this reason, we did a special investigation. Later, we found that there was no economic relationship between the two sides. It was all because Division Commander Lung Song heard about the establishment of the First Army. If he wanted to be the army commander, he needed more people to support him. The reason he was on good terms with Yang Taizhu was to express his goodwill to Minister Yang Shan. However, it was precisely because of his actions at that time that some people in the army made the wrong judgment. This led to the fact that the battalion commander and 3 company commanders were on good terms with Yang Taizhu and were ultimately bought over. As he spoke, Yang Sen carefully observed the changes in Yang Qindong's expression. Yang Sen knew that although it had been found that Lung Song was not involved in this matter, the two sides were, after all, so close. Could it be that he had already discovered the problem with Yang Taizhu during that incident? However, considering that he still needed department head Yang Shan to speak for him in the future, he pretended not to see it? Although this was an analysis, there was still a high possibility that it was true. If it wasn't for the fact that the Security Bureau only had suspicions and had no evidence, they would have really taken action. Although a division commander had a high position and power, if he was really involved, the Security Bureau would not be lenient when they took him down. Yang Qindong listened attentively. These were things that were not mentioned in the previous telegram. After all, what was said in the telegram had to be verified, and such guesses and assumptions would not be written in it. Otherwise, once the news was leaked, wouldn't it hurt some people's hearts and cause some unnecessary chaos? He digested what Yang San said in his heart. He knew that it was true that the Security Bureau did not have evidence, but such guesses were very likely to exist. If he were in Lung Song's position, would he make the same choice? Sigh, it's all because of fame and fortune. After sighing in his heart, Yang Qindong let out such a sigh after a long time. When they first followed Yang Qindong, everyone was thinking about how to make their lives better. Slowly, as Yang Xie continued to grow, this kind of thinking had undergone a substantial change. It turned into wanting to do something big together, and then it evolved into the current struggle for power and profit. This might be a common problem after becoming powerful, but Yang Qindong really didn't want the brothers who followed him from the beginning to fall behind because of this. He thought that one day, when he became successful and famous, those brothers who followed him from the beginning would still be able to stand by his side. That would be a matter of great merit and virtue. Give him another chance. Thinking like this in his heart, Yang Qindong decided to let this matter go. Even saints would make mistakes, but there was only one chance. If Lung Song didn't seize it and continued to make mistakes, then he really couldn't be blamed. Yang Qindong suddenly said this, and Yang San immediately understood the meaning behind it. He nodded and said, "Yes, I will send a telegram to Director Che Chao. There's no need to send people to keep an eye on Division Commander Lung. You still have to keep an eye on him. Not only Lung Song, as long as any official in Crimson City feels that there's something wrong with him, you can send people to keep an eye on him. This is one of the responsibilities of your Security Bureau." Yang Qindong waved his hand generously. He sent people to keep an eye on them not because he didn't trust them, but because he was constantly reminding them that someone was watching them. They had to know what they were doing and not make mistakes. Yes, yes. Yang San hurriedly nodded his head. All right, you can get up too. Yang Qindong saw that Yang San had also knelt for a while. The punishment and reminder had been used, so he gestured for him to get up. Since the sixth young master gestured for him to get up, Yang San had to stand up. He immediately nodded his head and got up. Just as he steadied himself, Yang Qindong spoke again. How's Little Yu's rectification campaign going? Sixth young master, it's been done very well. We've already found many problematic officials. Those who should be punished were punished, and those who should be fired were fired. We've also won the support of many people. Yang San was quite excited when he talked about this matter. It was obvious that this campaign was progressing well. Yes, those who have problems must be caught, but those who don't have problems must also be rewarded. Don't make everyone nervous. Someone still needs to do the work. By the way, the Security Bureau should support the establishment of the CIA as much as you can. Don't think that this is a division of power. As our territory grows larger, there will be more and more opportunities for problems to arise in the future. The Security Bureau alone is no longer enough, understand? Now that they were talking about the CIA, Yang San naturally nodded his head. He wanted to add a few words, such as how the Security Bureau's work had not been done properly. But when he thought about how the sixth young master probably wouldn't like to hear such self-criticism, he shut his mouth. The leader of the CIA was the fifth Madam, Sumaner. Rather than expressing his loyalty here, it was better to support her work. When the time came, The fifth madam would report his performance to the sixth young master, and the results would definitely be much better. All right, let's talk about the situation in the capital. Has my father-in-law suffered any grievances in the imperial prison? Putting the matter of Crimson City aside for now, Yang Qindong finally turned his attention to the situation at hand. No, Yang San quickly replied. It was clear that he was extremely concerned about this matter. We have people on duty in the imperial prison. Lord, who hasn't been punished. It's clear that the other party doesn't really want to punish him. They just want to test him. Yang Qindong nodded his head approvingly. Instead of arresting Hu Zhongning earlier or later, they had waited for the news that he was about to enter the capital before arresting him. This was an extremely obvious signal. From this, it could be seen that his arrival had scratched Zhu Qiyu's itch. Zhu Qiyu wanted to arrest Hu Zhongning, but he was also worried that he wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Yang Qindong could see through all of this. It was precisely for this reason that he wasn't in a rush. On the contrary, he calmly said, "Let's talk about what the others think." Chapter 794. The other people he was referring to were naturally the important officials in the Ming imperial court. In the Ming dynasty, where the group of scholars was very powerful, the emperor often had to look their faces when doing things. Many times their attitude was extremely important and could decide many things. They are smart. Most of them did not express their opinions. Yang Sen had already grasped some of the relevant information. Although the current Security Bureau could not arrange spies in every important official's home, they could still grasp the general situation through various methods. Thinking about it, the people who were caught this time can be considered to be part of their group. Yang Qindong chuckled. He would not forget that his father-in-law, Hu Chongning, still had a good father. Hu Chongning was indeed an important force in the group of scholars. Based on this, those people would not hit him when he was down. Seeing that the young master had thought of everything, Yang San swallowed the words he wanted to remind him. He knew that the young master's thoughts were deep and would definitely counterattack, so he asked tentatively, "Young master, when are you going to make your move?" "Are you ready?" "Yes, young master. Everything is ready for you. I'm just waiting for your order." Yang San said confidently this time. Very good. Yang Qindong was satisfied with Yang San's performance. When he was on his way, he had received the news of Hu Chongning's arrest from the Security Bureau. Since the other party had already made their move, how could he not be prepared? Were they trying to test him? Then he would give a response, so that it would not be too boring for one person to perform a one-man show. Wait for my news. This time we will play with them. Yang Qindong's face revealed a slightly mocking smile. As soon as the news of his return spread out, Dai Zongma summoned the 7 important officials under him for a meeting. This matter was first passed to the ears of the Security Bureau through Su Yozhin's mouth, and then it was passed to the ears of the Security Bureau. Yang Qindong thought that all of this was very normal. Among the 7 important ministers, the grandson of the Minister of Appointments, Wang Ji, followed him, and the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, married him. This meant that they would not give the emperor any ideas to deal with him. Perhaps when some matters involved their interests, they would make a move, but they would never go so far as to openly deal with him. On this point, Yang Qindong's mind was very clear. There was no such thing as an eternal friend or an eternal enemy. This saying was not wrong. As long as there was no conflict of interest, the two of them should be more biased towards him. There was no need to talk about the Minister of Justice, Su Yozhin. He was one of his own people, and their interests had long been tied together. He was the last person who would make a move against him. As a result, 3 out of the 7 were gone. As for the remaining 4 people, they might listen to Dai Zongji's words, but they did not have any personal enmity with him. In addition, before he left more than a year ago, he had dealt with the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. This was tantamount to a show of force, which was equivalent to ringing the alarm bell for them. When he had to deal with a person with all his strength, even the emperor could not protect him. This was very alarming. Unless it was necessary, they would not use all their strength to deal with him. Thinking about it this way, Dai Zong was really pitiful. None of the 7 important ministers could be used in this matter, and he could only personally go. Although it was not to the extent of going into battle with his bare arms, there were many things that he had to spend a lot of effort on. Thinking about the situation in the imperial court in Ming, Yang Qindong was much more confident. Internally, there were elements of disunity. Externally, there was the illustrious reputation of the mercenaries on the battlefield. Yang Qindong, who already had the power to resist, believed that this trip to the capital of Ming this time, although it seemed dangerous, was in fact far less difficult than everyone imagined. Otherwise, he would not have personally taken the risk. Go. This time, my safety is truly in the hands of the Bureau of Security. Yang Qindong made up his mind and slowly stood up. Young master, be at ease. We will do our best to ensure the safety of the young master. Yang Sen also stood up and spoke as if he was making a military order. With the official business over, Yang Qindong returned to the inner courtyard. Second Madame Xiao Yin and fourth Madame Xiang Yangzi were not asleep. The 2 of them had already dismissed their servants and did not even bring their personal maids. They were just sitting in the hall. After not seeing each other for more than a year, the 2 of them greatly missed their husband. In the past, they had the experience of sharing the same bed. Although it was very embarrassing, reality had already told them that one of them was no longer able to satisfy their husband. Since this was the case, the 2 of them would go into battle together. The decision had been made, but after all, they had not done it for more than a year. Their faces were still red with embarrassment. When Yang Qindong appeared, they lowered their heads even more. However, the 6th young master's hearty laughter was heard. No one knows their husband better than his wife. Madams, I'm here. The current situation was indescribable, but in short, it was a storm. A battle was unavoidable. After the energetic Yang Qindong had more or less tidied up the 2 madams, he hugged each of them with one arm and began to chat. Although the 2 ladies had just experienced a war and were already very tired, after all, they hadn't seen their husband for so long, so they still had a lot to say in their hearts. This made them forcibly resist their sleepiness and stay to talk to Yang Qindong in detail. 7th older sister is very pitiful. Although she does not have to worry about food and drink in the manner, I can see that her mood is somewhat depressed. Xiao Yin lay under Yang Qindong's arm and changed to a more comfortable position. She took the initiative to bring up Yang Duo's matter. Among his sisters, Yang Qindong respected his eldest sister the most. He loved his 7th older sister the most. Anyone who was close to him could see this. That was why Xiao Yin timely cried out for Yang Duo's innocence. Gossip is a fearful thing. Yang Qindong said these words with a sigh. In feudal society, women had always been in a subordinate position. As the saying went, if you marry a chicken, follow the chicken. If you marry a dog, follow the dog. This was a true portrayal of their lives. Yang Duo was a divorced woman. Although it was said that because of Yang Qindong's interference, it was not a divorce but a divorce, after all. She was not an ordinary person. Just based on the fact that she had a brother who was a duke, she was already incomparably powerful. Such a woman really made people love and hate her. She loved her beauty and status. She also hated her status. Her previous husband had been unceremoniously dealt with by Yang Qindong. If he married Yang Duo and was in a bad mood one day, wouldn't the Duke of Loyal and Daring deal with them the same way he dealt with her previous husband? It was almost impossible for a divorced woman to become the first wife of a man. However, you still want to marry the Duke of Loyal and Daring's older sister as a concubine? Are you really tired of living? Under these conditions and circumstances, no one had come to propose marriage, even though they had been divorced for more than 2 years. It looked like Yang Duo was really going to become an old lady and be alone for the rest of her life. As Yang Qindong's wife and the one who had followed the young master for the longest time, how could Xiao Yi not ask? How could she not be anxious? That's right. Sometimes when I see seventh sister standing by herself, she really does give off a very lonely and pitiful feeling, Lady Xiang said cooperatively. She was naturally paying attention to Yang Duo because her husband was very fond of his youngest sister. As a wife, it was only right for her to worry about this matter. The voices of the two wives were tinged with grief, but Yang Qindong had an indifferent expression. It's fine. When I take you away this time, I'll take seventh sister with me. She'll definitely find someone she likes, something she likes to do, and a home that belongs to her. In the capital, Yang Qindong did not only have seventh sister, but she was the only one without a husband, so she was the most suitable person to be taken away. Others would not say anything, and they would only say that he was a younger brother who valued friendship, so there was no need to be polite. Hearing that Yang Qindong was going to take Yang Duo away, Xiao Yin breathed a sigh of relief. She was really worried that her husband would only take them away and leave seventh sister behind. If that was the case, she did not dare to imagine what would happen. At the very least, she would often accompany seventh sister and chat with her. But once she was gone, wouldn't seventh sister be even more lonely? With Yang Duo's problem solved, a new one appeared. Husband, what are you going to do about Junko? You've left her here for more than 2 years. What are you going to do? That's right. Little sister Junko is also very beautiful. The fourth madam, Lady Xiang, began her act of leaving a gap, and then raised her head to look curiously at Yang Qindong, who was lying beside her. When it came to Junko's matter, Yang Qindong naturally couldn't be as indifferent as when he was talking about seventh sister. From the bottom of his heart, which man did not love beautiful women? Especially Junko's body was full of nobility, and she was very beautiful and smart. But if he had to take her for himself just because she was beautiful, Yang Qindong could not do such a thing. On the contrary, his heart was still very conflicted. He must conquer the Japanese Empire. This was not only a matter of the plan, but some things had already begun to be carried out secretly. The artillery had been sent out, and he heard that the other side was actively preparing. But because the matter was too big, if he did not have the confidence to succeed in one shot, he could not act rashly. This was why there was no decisive battle. The day when the Japanese Empire was in chaos would be the day when Yang Qindong would attack. At that time, how could he face Junko? He had destroyed her home, and now he wanted her to follow him wholeheartedly. Even though Yang Qindong was very confident in some aspects, he did not think that he could do it. With such a contradiction in his heart, Yang Qindong adopted an indifferent attitude towards Junko, with the idea of letting nature take its course. If the other party really wanted to stay, of course he would welcome her. If the other party must leave, then he would let her go. It could only be said that they were not fated to be together. Chapter 795. This time, I'll be taking her with me. Once we're out of Bai Ming's territory, she'll be safe. At that time, I'll let her choose what path she wants to take. Yang Qindong took a deep breath and made a difficult decision. Is husband willing to part with her? Xiao Yin asked playfully. She naturally didn't know what was on Yang Qindong's mind. She only thought that he wouldn't be able to throw away his face, which was why he came up with such an excuse. Yang Qindong naturally wouldn't explain too much. After all, he was well aware that sometimes it was impossible to reason with a woman. He laughed heartily and said, "It's been a long time since you've gone to the capital for a stroll. It's almost the new year, so it must be very lively. How about we go to the immortal abode for a drink tomorrow?" Sure enough, this method of replacing a tree with a flower was very effective. When they heard that Yang Qindong was going to take them to the capital, the two madams were extremely happy. Out of consideration for their safety, they had been cooped up in the Yang clan manor for a long time. Their hearts were already itching to fly out, not to mention that they would be accompanied by their husband. The two women immediately agreed. All right, it's decided then. But a good night is worth 1,000 gold. Shouldn't we do something? Yang Qindong, who had already rested enough, was starting to raise a certain part of his body. Ah! The two women cried out in shock and embarrassment, and then you know what happened. After a busy night, the two madams were both lazing in bed the next morning. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, Yang Qindong was an animal. On the contrary, he got out of bed normally, and his expression was refreshed. First, he practiced military boxing 5 times in a row. Then he ran 5 kilometers with the guards. When he returned to the manor for breakfast, he called for his wife to accompany him. The two of them whispered to each other for a long time, but outsiders didn't know what they were talking about. At 9 in the morning, the sun was already high in the sky. Only then did the two madams get out of bed with the help of their maids. After a simple bowl of porridge, they began to put on their disguises. Another hour passed, and when the clock struck 10:15, the two women boarded the largest carriage in the manor. Together with Yang Qindong, they set off for the capital 15 li away. Of course, this carriage was different. The first carriage with shock absorbers had followed Yang Qindong, first madam, and third madam to the southern Ming dynasty. This carriage was the latest one, and it was more luxurious than the previous one. The wheels of the carriage were not the commonly used wooden wheels, but leather wheels that seemed to have been modified from rubber. There were also many shock absorbers added. The interior of the carriage was also much larger, and there were even many thin fabrics placed in the inner layer of the carriage. This would not increase the weight of the carriage, and in case someone attacked with a bow or even a gun, it would be able to defend against arrows and bullets. The carriage left the Yang family manor, accompanied by the 2 guards and more than 100 black cavalry. Unlike yesterday, the Wolf Fong Special Forces and Ghost Shadow Snipers were nowhere to be seen. Under the escort of more than 100 black cavalry, the carriage left the manor and headed straight for the Yongding Gate of the capital. The moment the carriage left the manor, the embroidered uniformed guard spies who had been keeping watch outside received the news. This news was then reported up through the ranks, and it didn't take long for it to reach Chief Eunuch Jining. It seems like he's about to make a move. Have someone keep a close eye on them. Without orders, they're not to act rashly. Jining still didn't know what Yang Qindong was planning, so she could only wait and see. This allowed Yang Qindong's group to enter the capital without any obstructions. The 100-some black cavalry appeared on the streets of the capital in an awe-inspiring manner. Their appearance naturally attracted the attention of the common people, and a piece of news quickly began to spread through the crowd. This is the Duke of Loyalty, known as the War God. Not long ago, he was ordered by the Emperor to reclaim Tulu City. I heard that just the Mongol cavalry alone killed over 10,000 people and saved countless of our Han people. An elegant young master stood in the crowd and told the news he knew. What? There was such a thing? Why haven't I heard of it before? Many of the commoners who suddenly heard this revealed shocked expressions. There was also this person who had a disapproving expression. It was clear that they would not believe this kind of rumor. Of course, you wouldn't have heard of it. Let me tell you, isn't it almost the new year? When the time comes, His Majesty will announce it as a joyous occasion for the entire country. This news is still under lockdown. If not for the fact that I have a friend who is an official in the Bureau of Military Personnel, I wouldn't have heard of this news either. The elegant young master found a legitimate reason, his face saying that he had many connections and couldn't be like them. Yes, my master also mentioned it in his residence. It really is true, a man in the garb of a retainer in the crowd suddenly said, cooperating with the young master. This immediately drew everyone's attention. For a matter, if one person said it was true, it might not be credible. But when more people said it was true, then it couldn't be treated as idle. For a time, this news blew like a cold wind in all directions, and some people with big mouths began to spread this news out. But as the instigator, the young master and his servant had long disappeared into the crowd. They were originally secret agents of the Security Bureau and were used to playing many roles. What happened just now was just a very common case in the mission. When the news spread, Yang Qindong's carriage was moving through the crowd. It was rare for people to make way for him from afar. This was a form of respect for heroes. But how could it not be a reflection of the people's hearts? The embroidered, uniformed guards who had been following the carriage were also stunned by this scene. However, it was clearly too late to investigate the source of the news. Seeing how much the common people loved the Duke of Loyalty, they had no choice but to report this news to their superiors. In the imperial palace, Zhu Qiyu, who had also heard the news, was waiting for the latest developments. Suddenly, he heard a report from one of his subordinates. When he heard the rumors on the streets, his face filled with anger, and he suddenly roared, "This is kidnapping! Kidnapping! When he went to attack Talis City, when did he receive our edict? What is he trying to do? Does he think that because he has the support of the common people, we don't dare to do anything to him? This is Ming's capital. Here, we have the final say, we have the final say." Seeing the emperor's anger, Jining dropped to her knees and cried, "Your Majesty, please calm down, Your Majesty, please calm down. In truth, if you think about it carefully, this isn't a bad thing. Since this news has spread, it must be the work of the Duke of Loyalty. Doesn't this mean that he intends to gift Talis City to Your Majesty?" Zhu Qiyu, who had wanted to continue roaring to vent his dissatisfaction, suddenly stopped. Instead, he seemed to be thinking about something. Soon after, he chuckled and said, "That's right, my beloved subject's words are exactly what we want. Since that's the case, I'll let some people know what it means to lift a rock and smash one's own foot. How about this? Immediately pass down the order to spread the news that the Duke of Loyalty attacked Talis City on our orders. Let everyone in the world know. Ha 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 ha." A tiny Talis City naturally didn't enter Zhu Qiyu's eyes. He didn't even consider how many Mongolian soldiers there were in the city or how many Han commoners were under threat. His reputation was nothing more than a good reputation for daring to face the Mongols and raising the morale of the people. "Your Majesty is wise." Jining hurriedly flattered. The delighted Zhu Qiyu laughed heartily as he made his way to the harem. He wanted to share this good news with the Empress and the imperial concubines. As for Yang Qindong, he trusted that the embroidered uniform guard was keeping an eye on him to see if anything had happened. After the decree was issued, news quickly spread throughout the city that Ming had taken Talis City and that the Han commoners that had been rescued. The commoners were overjoyed when they heard this news. After all, they had always retreated and avoided the Mongol army of the steppe. They rarely took the initiative to attack, let alone take down a city, kill the Mongol soldiers, and rescue the commoners. This news caused the atmosphere of the new year to become even more lively. Some of the wealthier commoners even set off firecrackers in the streets, as if the entire country was celebrating. In this celebratory atmosphere, Yang Qindong's group arrived outside the immortal abode. The manager in charge of the place came out to welcome them, leading them to the best box in the immortal abode, the Sky Room 1. It was almost the new year, and Ming seemed to be celebrating the prosperity of the country. The capital was bustling with activity, and the business of the immortal abode was getting better and better. Over the past 3 years, more and more merchants and officials had joined the immortal abode. Gradually, the immortal abode became the most luxurious place in the city. It was as if an important friend had come, and if they didn't treat him to a meal, they would be neglecting him. In this atmosphere, the mark of the Yang clan on the immortal abode grew increasingly faint. In the immortal abode, Yang Qindong's group entered a private room and sat down. In a residence 3 streets away from the immortal abode, a vigorous youth pushed open the door and entered. When he saw the official seated in the main hall, he dropped to his knees and said, "This lowly one, Qingguo, pays respects to milord. Milord, this person is called Chingwa. He is very clever. An embroidered uniform guard official whispered into the official's ear. The person called milord had a rather pale complexion. Even if one looked closely, they wouldn't be able to see any beard at the corner of his mouth. With this insignia, his identity was obvious. He was most likely a eunuch. Eunuchs that the embroidered uniform guard tried to curry favor with tended to have great backgrounds. This was indeed the case. This person's surname was Jean, but his given name was incomplete. He was one of the adopted sons of Ming, the great eunuch of the ceremony bureau. The 13-sword Shan Kuan, who had tried to assassinate Yang Qindong in the south, had been sent by this person. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.